They told her to strip away everything, but what he truly took from her would change her fate forever. In the frozen heart of 1883, a woman stood in chains, sold like cattle to pay debts she never owed. The crowd laughed. No one wanted her, until a silent mountain man stepped forward and paid her full price. Why would he buy what everyone else rejected? As she was led into the wilderness, one truth burned in her chest. Whatever waited in those mountains couldn't be worse than the life she'd just left. Or could it? Stay until the end to see how her story unfolds. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The iron bit into Lena Holloway's wrists like winter itself, cold, merciless, unforgiving. She stood on the auction platform in the town square of Bitter Creek, Montana Territory, her breath forming small clouds in the February air that dispersed and died just as quickly as her hopes had. Lot 17! The auctioneer's voice cracked through the frozen morning like a whip. One female, age 22, sound of body if not much to look at. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Lena felt it wash over her like dirty water, but she kept her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the gathered townsfolk, beyond the snow-capped peaks that ring the valley, beyond everything. Her father had been dead 3 months. The debts he'd left behind had taken exactly 2 weeks to surface, carried on the backs of men with hard eyes and legal papers. Her Uncle Victor had been among them, his smile thin as a knife blade. "The law's the law, girl," he'd said, standing in the doorway of the small house where she'd lived her entire life. "Your pa signed his name, that makes it binding. You work off what's owed or you hang for theft, simple as that." It wasn't simple. Nothing about it was simple, but in Bitter Creek in the winter of 1883, a woman alone had about as many rights as the snow. There one moment, trampled underfoot the next. "Do I hear $20? The auctioneer's gavel hung poised like an executioner's blade. Silence. The kind that pressed against the eardrums. Lena stood perfectly still in the dress they'd given her, thin cotton, meant to show she had no hidden defects, no obvious disease. The cold cut through it like she wasn't wearing anything at all. They'd made her take off her wool coat, her shawl, everything that might hide her shape. "Buyers need to see what they're getting," the sheriff had said, not meeting her eyes. She was tall for a woman, broad-shouldered, with hands that showed years of work. Not delicate, not pretty, not the kind of woman men wrote songs about. She'd known that her whole life, accepted it the way she accepted the color of her eyes or the way her hair never held a curl. $20? The auctioneer tried again, his voice losing its performative edge. "She's strong, good for labor. Any takers?" More silence. Someone coughed. A baby cried somewhere in the crowd and was quickly hushed. Lena's Uncle Victor stood near the front, arms crossed, watching with the satisfaction of a man who'd already won. Next to him, Magnus Reed, the man who held most of her father's debt, picked at his teeth with a wooden sliver. 15? The auctioneer was sweating now despite the cold. "Come now, gentlemen, that's less than you'd pay for a decent horse." "Horse'd be more useful," someone called out. More laughter. The chains rattled as Lena shifted her weight. Her feet had gone numb 10 minutes ago. She focused on that numbness, let it spread up through her body, into her chest, her heart. Numbness was better than feeling. Numbness was survival. $10, the auctioneer's voice had gone shrill. Surely someone— "Lot's contaminated," Victor called out suddenly. "Her mother died of the wasting sickness. Could be the daughters got it too." It was a lie. Her mother had died in childbirth 15 years ago, taking Lena's baby brother with her. But lies didn't need truth to do their damage. The crowd shifted, pulled back like a tide going out. The auctioneer looked at Victor, then at Magnus Reed, then at his ledger. His jaw worked soundlessly for a moment. Everyone in Bitter Creek knew who really held the power, and it wasn't the man with the gavel. "Well, The auctioneer cleared his throat. "If there are no legitimate bids, then by order of the territorial court, the debt holder may claim $200. The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and rough as stone grinding against stone. Heads turned. The crowd parted. He was tall, taller even than Lena, with shoulders that seemed to fill the space around him. His coat was heavy fur, his hat pulled low, but she could see the dark beard, the weathered face, the eyes that looked like they'd seen winters she couldn't imagine. Rowan Hale. Everyone knew the name, though few knew the man. He came down from his mountain claim twice a year, once in fall to trade furs, once in spring for supplies. Kept to himself. Spoke to no one unless necessary. There were stories about him, the kind of stories people told in whispers, about what he'd been before he disappeared into the high country, about why he stayed alone. Did you say? The auctioneer fumbled with his ledger. 200? Cash. Rowan's hand emerged from his coat holding a leather pouch. He tossed it to the platform. It landed with a heavy thunk that silenced every whisper. Count it if you need to. Victor's face had gone red. Now hold on. You holding the debt or not? Rowan's eyes fixed on him. Thought this was an auction. It is, but... Victor sputtered. But you can't just... Can't I? Rowan tilted his head slightly. Auction means highest bidder wins. I'm bidding. You gonna bid higher? The crowd had gone absolutely silent. Even the baby had stopped crying. Magnus Reed stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. That's a lot of money for something nobody else wants, Hale. Makes a man wonder about your intentions. Man's intentions are his own business. Rowan didn't move, but something in his stillness made Magnus's hand drift away from his weapon. You want my money or not? The auctioneer's hand shook as he opened the pouch. He counted quickly, his lips moving. It's all here. $200, gold and silver. Then we're done. Rowan walked forward, his boots crunching in the snow. Give me the papers. But... Victor looked at Magnus, at the sheriff, at anyone who might help him. This ain't right. Law's the law, Rowan said, throwing Victor's own words back at him. Ain't that what you said? The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. He was a company man. Everyone knew it, but even company men had to maintain appearances. Bid's legitimate, he said finally. Debts paid in full. Release her. The auctioneer fumbled with the key to Lena's chains. His hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the lock open. When the iron finally fell away, Lena's arms dropped to her sides, suddenly weightless. She looked at the man who'd just bought her. Up close, she could see the scars on his face, the gray threading through his dark hair, the way his eyes assessed her without judgment or interest, just cold calculation. Can you walk? His voice was quieter now, meant just for her. She nodded. She could walk. She could do whatever she needed to do to survive. Then walk! He turned and headed toward the edge of town where 2 horses waited, a large roan and a smaller paint. We've got distance to cover before dark. Lena followed because there was nothing else to do. Behind her, she heard Victor's voice rising in protest, heard Magnus trying to calm him down, heard the crowd beginning to murmur and speculate. She didn't look back. Looking back served no purpose. At the horses, Rowan handed her a bundle of fabric. Put this on. It was a coat, thick wool lined with fur, far warmer than anything she'd ever owned. She pulled it on with trembling fingers. It was too big, made for someone broader, but the warmth was immediate and shocking. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't acknowledge it, just checked the paint saddle, then gestured for her to mount. She'd ridden before, though not often. Her father had kept a mule for plowing, and she'd learned to sit a saddle when she was young. She pulled herself up, her muscles protesting after standing so long in the cold. Rowan mounted the roan in one smooth motion. Without another word, he turned the horse toward the mountains and started riding. Lena followed, because that's what property did. They rode in silence for 3 hours. The town fell away behind them, swallowed by the vast white wilderness. The trail, if it could be called a trail, wound upward through pine forests so dense the sunlight barely penetrated. Snow clung to every branch, turning the world into something from a fever dream. Lena's body slowly came back to life as they rode. The warmth of the coat seeped into her bones. Her hands, wrapped in the horse's mane, regained feeling with painful prickles. Her mind, which had been carefully blank since the moment they'd chained her, began to work again. What did he want with her? Men didn't spend $200 on something they didn't plan to use. $200 was a fortune, enough to buy land, livestock, a future. And he'd spent it on her without hesitation, without even seeing her up close first. The stories about Rowan Hale cycled through her memory. Mountain man, trapper. Someone said he'd been a soldier once, down south before the war. Someone else claimed he'd killed a man in Denver and fled to the territories. Another swore he'd had a family once, that they'd died of fever, and he'd gone to the mountains to escape the memories. Stories
This
were just
story was
stories,
posted
though.
on the
In
channel
Bitter
West
Creek,
of Betrayal.
people told stories
Please
about
do not
everyone.
repost it in
They
any
told
form.
stories about her father, drunk, gambler, fool. All true, as it turned out. They told stories about her, too. Strange girl. Too big, too quiet, too odd. Probably touched in the head like her mother's sister had been. She pushed the thoughts away. What people said didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except what came next. The sun was starting its descent toward the peaks when Rowan finally stopped. They'd climbed high enough that Lena's ears had popped twice. The air was thinner here, sharper, like breathing knives made of ice. "We rest here," Rowan said, dismounting. 10 minutes. Lena slid off the paint, her legs nearly buckling. 3 hours in the saddle after weeks of barely eating had drained her more than she'd realized. Rowan pulled something from his saddlebag and handed it to her, jerky, dried and salted. Her stomach clenched at the smell. "Eat," he said. "You'll need strength for the rest of the climb." She ate, forcing herself to chew slowly, even though hunger screamed at her to devour it. While she ate, Rowan checked both horses, adjusted their loads, scanned the trail ahead with eyes that never stopped moving. "How much farther?" she asked, her voice rough from disuse. 3 hours, maybe 4. He glanced at the sky. "We'll make it before full dark if we keep pace." She wanted to ask where they were going, what he planned to do with her, what he expected, but the question stuck in her throat. Asking meant caring about the answers, and caring was dangerous. They mounted again and rode on. Darkness was gathering in earnest when the cabin came into view. It sat on a broad shelf of land carved into the mountainside, backed by a sheer rock face that sheltered it from the worst winds. Pine forests flanked it on both sides. A stream, partially frozen, ran nearby. She could hear the water moving beneath the ice. The cabin itself was larger than she'd expected. Built from massive logs chinked with what looked like clay and moss, it had a stone chimney at one end and a wide porch across the front. A lean-to stable stood off to one side, big enough for the horses and then some. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone else was here. Lena's heart kicked against her ribs. Another man? More than one? But when they rode up, no one emerged. Rowan dismounted and went to the cabin door, pushed it open, disappeared inside. A moment later, lamplight bloomed in the windows. He came back out, gestured for her to dismount. "Come on, bring your things." "I don't have any things," she said quietly. He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, not quite sympathy, but acknowledgement. "Right. Come on, then." She followed him inside. The cabin was warm, blessedly, impossibly warm. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and she realized he must have banked it before leaving, timed it to still be burning when he returned. The room was neat, obsessively so. A table and 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, a bed in one corner, a smaller cot in another. Furs and blankets hung from pegs on the walls. Everything had a place, a purpose. "You'll sleep there," he pointed to the cot. "I take the bed. Chamber pots under it. Empty it every morning in the latrine behind the cabin. You'll find it easy enough." Lena nodded, taking it all in. "There's a wash basin by the door, water barrel outside. Keep it filled from the stream. You cook, you clean, you help with the animals when needed. Understood?" "Yes." "You try to run, you'll die. Not a threat, just fact. You don't know these mountains. Winter up here kills quick and certain." "I understand." He studied her for a moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he moved to the far side of the room and began removing his coat, his hat, the layers that had made him seem even larger than he was. "You're filthy," he said without looking at her. "Probably haven't had a real bath in weeks." Shame burned through her chest. She knew she smelled, knew her hair was matted, knew her skin was gray with grime. They hadn't let her wash at the jail, said it was a waste of water on someone who'd just get dirty again. "There's a tub in the lean-to," Rowan continued. "I'll heat water. You'll wash, all of you. Those clothes you're wearing, burn them. There's clean things in the chest by the cot." Fear spiked through her numbness. This was it then. This was where it started. She must have made some sound, some movement, because Rowan turned to look at her. His expression was tired, almost annoyed. "I'm not going to touch you," he said flatly. "You're here to work, not to service me. But I'll not have disease in my home, and I'll not have filth. You'll wash because that's what civilized people do. Clear?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." He turned back to the fire, began loading more wood. "I'll heat the water and bring it out. You handle the rest yourself." The lean-to was attached to the side of the cabin, sheltered but not heated. The tub sat in the center, large, copper, well-maintained. Lena stood next to it, watching steam rise from the water Rowan had poured, bucket after bucket, until the tub was half full. "Hot enough?" he asked, setting down the final bucket. She dipped her fingers in. It was just short of scalding. "Yes." "Soap's there, towels too. Take your time. Water'll stay warm for a while." He paused at the doorway. "I'll be inside. Holler if you need anything." Then he was gone, and she was alone with the steam and the dark and the impossible reality of what had just happened. Slowly, Lena removed the coat he'd given her, then the thin cotton dress from the auction, the worn undergarments beneath. She stood naked in the cold air for just a moment, her body covered in goosebumps, and then she stepped into the water. The heat was shocking. It forced the air from her lungs in a gasp, but she sank down anyway, let the water close over her shoulders, her neck, everything but her face. When was the last time she'd been truly warm? Before her father died, certainly. Before the debts came due. Before the world proved it had no use for her. She stayed there until the water began to cool, then scrubbed herself with the soap, rough lye that stung but cleaned. She washed her hair 3 times, working out the tangles with her fingers, watching the water turn gray-brown with released dirt. When she finally climbed out, the air bit at her clean skin like something alive. She dried quickly with the towel, then went to the chest Rowan had mentioned. Inside were clothes, men's clothes, she realized, but clean and mended. Wool trousers that she had to roll at the ankles, a flannel shirt that hung loose but trapped warmth, thick socks. Everything smelled like cedar and smoke. She dressed quickly, then gathered her old clothes. They felt like shed skin, like evidence of someone she no longer was. She carried them to the fire pit outside and fed them to the flames, watching them curl and blacken and disappear. When she went back inside, Rowan was at the table, writing in a ledger by lamplight. He looked up, assessed her with the same neutral expression he'd worn all day. "Better?" he said. "Eat something, then sleep. Dawn comes early here." There was bread on the table, hard cheese, dried apple slices. She ate standing up, too tired to sit, too hungry to care about manners. Rowan went back to his ledger. Didn't watch her, didn't comment. Just existed in the same space, separate and untouchable. When she couldn't eat anymore, Lena went to the cot, pulled the blankets over herself and closed her eyes. She didn't expect to sleep, didn't think her mind would allow it. But exhaustion was a deeper force than fear, and within minutes, she was gone. She woke to the sound of movement, quiet but purposeful. Gray pre-dawn light leaked through the cabin's single window. Rowan was already up, already dressed, building up the fire. "You know how to cook?" he asked without preamble. Lena pushed herself up on the cot. Her body ached in 1,000 places. "Yes." "Good. There's cornmeal in the barrel, coffee in the tin. Make enough for both of us." He pulled on his coat. "I'm seeing to the horses." He was gone before she could respond. Lena stood, her muscles protesting. The cabin was cold despite the fire, the kind of cold that lived in the walls, in the floor, in the very air. She added wood to the flames, then searched until she found what she needed. Cooking was familiar, comforting even. Her hands knew what to do without her mind having to guide them. Cornmeal mush, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Simple, but hot and filling. Rowan returned as she was setting it out. He hung his coat, stamped snow from his boots, came to the table without a word, ate quickly, efficiently, like a man who viewed food as fuel and nothing more. "It's good," he said after a few minutes. "You can cook. That's useful." She nodded, eating her own portion more slowly. "This is how it works," Rowan said, setting down his spoon. "I trap. That's my work, my income. You maintain the cabin, cooking, cleaning, mending, firewood when I'm gone. When I'm here, you help with whatever needs doing. Sometimes that's skinning pelts. Sometimes it's
This story
hauling
was
water.
posted on the channel
Sometimes it's
West of
just staying
Betrayal.
quiet and out
Please
of
do
the
not
way.
repost it
He
in
looked
any
at her
form.
directly. I paid $200 for you. That's what I'd pay for 3 years of labor from a hired man. So that's what I expect. 3 years. You work hard. You don't complain. You don't cause trouble. At the end of 3 years, you're free. I'll give you provisions and enough coin to start somewhere new. Understood? 3 years. It sounded like a lifetime. It sounded like mercy. Understood, she said. Good. He stood, began gathering supplies. I'm running trap lines today. I'll be back before dark. There's plenty to keep you busy here. Start with sorting through the pelts in the lean-to. Any that are properly cured, bring inside and stack by the far wall. Any that aren't, leave them be. He paused at the door. And Lena? Don't touch my rifle. Don't touch my traps. Don't go wandering off. This mountain's got 1,000 ways to kill you, and most of them are faster than you can scream. Then he was gone again, and she was alone. So, the days developed a rhythm. Rowan left at dawn, often not returning until dusk. Lena worked, not because she had to, but because the work was there and needed doing. The cabin required constant attention. Firewood, water, cooking, cleaning. The animals, 2 horses, 3 goats, a dozen chickens that somehow survived in the mountain cold, needed tending. The pelts needed sorting, cleaning, preparing for eventual sale. She'd expected hardship, expected cruelty, expected to be used in the ways men used women they'd bought. Instead, she found routine, distance, a strange, sterile coexistence. Rowan barely spoke to her. Mornings, he gave instructions. Do this, check that, watch for such and such. Evenings, he asked brief questions about what she'd accomplished. Beyond that, silence. He ate the meals she prepared without comment unless something was wrong. He slept on his side of the cabin while she slept on hers. He treated her the way a man might treat a useful tool, with care, but without warmth. It should have been a relief. In many ways it was. But there was something else too, something she couldn't name, an awareness of his constant judgment, his assessment of her worth based purely on output. She found herself working harder, trying to anticipate what he'd need before he asked, attempting to prove her value. Why? She didn't know, didn't want to examine it too closely. 2 weeks passed. 3. A month. Winter deepened its grip on the mountain. Snow fell almost daily, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent. The world beyond the cabin might as well have ceased to exist. One evening, Rowan came back early, his face tight with pain. He said nothing, just went to his bed and lay down. Lena watched him for a moment, then approached carefully. Are you hurt? Twisted my ankle on the upper trail, he said through gritted teeth. It's nothing. But she could see the swelling, even through his boot. You need to get that boot off before the swelling gets worse. I can manage. You can't even reach it. She knelt beside the bed. Let me help. He looked at her for a long moment, something warring in his expression. Then he nodded once. She worked carefully, unlacing the boot, easing it off as gently as she could. His ankle was already purple, swollen to twice its normal size. She'd seen injuries like this before. Her father had fallen off the mule once, twisted his leg badly. Stay there, she said, standing. Don't move it. She went outside, gathered clean snow in a bucket, brought it back, wrapped the snow in a cloth and pressed it against the swelling. Rowan hissed but didn't pull away. Keep pressure on it, she said. Well, the cold will help bring down the swelling, and you need to stay off it for at least a few days. Can't, he said. Traps need checking. The traps can wait. If you try to walk on this tomorrow, you'll be laid up for weeks instead of days. Their eyes met. She realized it was the most she'd spoken to him since arriving, the most she'd pushed back against his decisions. You telling me what to do? His voice was quiet, but there was something in it, not quite anger, but testing. I'm telling you what's practical, she said evenly. You paid $200 for 3 years of work. If you cripple yourself being stubborn, you get less than you paid for. A beat of silence. Then, incredibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Fair point, he said. All right, I'll stay off it, but you'll have to handle the animals yourself, all of them. I can do that. And keep the firewood stocked. Place goes through near a cord a week in this cold. I know. He studied her for another moment, then nodded. All right then. She changed the snow compress 3 more times that evening, made him eat, though he claimed he wasn't hungry, finally insisted he needed to sleep, not sit up brooding about lost time. As she turned down the lamp, she heard his voice in the darkness. Thank you. 2 words, quiet, grudging, but real. You're welcome, she said. The injury kept Rowan cabin-bound for 4 days. Lena managed the work, barely, but she managed. Her hands blistered from splitting wood. Her back ached from hauling water. The goats tested her patience at every turn. But she did it, kept everything running, kept them both alive. On the 4th evening, Rowan tested his weight on the injured ankle, winced but stayed upright. It'll do, he said. I can get back out tomorrow. Lena looked up from the stew she was stirring. Are you sure? Another day of rest wouldn't hurt. Can't afford it. I've already lost 4 days of trapping. Any longer, and the early season pelts won't be worth taking. She wanted to argue, but knew it was pointless. He'd made up his mind. That night, after dinner, Rowan did something unexpected. He pulled a book from the shelf, one of perhaps 24 that lined the wall above his bed. You read? He asked. Yes. He handed her the book. Then read. Sitting around doing nothing makes me mean. It was a collection of stories. Some she recognized, some she didn't. She opened it to a random page and began to read aloud, her voice soft in the firelit cabin. Rowan sat in his chair, eyes half closed, listening. She read for an hour. When she finally stopped, her throat was dry and her voice was hoarse. You read well, Rowan said. Better than most. My mother taught me, before she died. She taught you well. A pause. Then, will you read again tomorrow night? Lena looked at him, surprised. If you want. I want. It became another part of their routine. Every evening after dinner, she read while he listened. Sometimes he commented on the stories. Sometimes he just sat in silence. But he was always there, always attentive. Something was shifting between them. Something subtle but unmistakable. The wall of distance wasn't crumbling exactly, but developing cracks. Small ones, barely visible, but there. Man. 6 weeks after her arrival, a storm hit that made all the previous snowfalls seem gentle. It came howling down from the peaks with wind that shook the cabin's walls. Snow fell so thick that Lena couldn't see the lean-to from the front door. The temperature dropped until the water in the barrel began to freeze despite being sheltered. Rowan had made it back just before the storm hit, his arms full of pelts. This is bad, he said, shaking snow from his coat. Could last 3 days. Maybe more. They prepared like soldiers facing a siege, brought all the firewood inside that would fit, filled every container with water, moved the animals into the lean-to where they'd be protected from the worst of the wind, checked and double-checked the chimney, the shutters, the door. By nightfall, the storm was in full fury. Wind screamed around the cabin like something alive and furious. Snow drifted against the walls. The temperature inside, despite the roaring fire, dropped until Lena could see her breath. Come here, Rowan said suddenly. She looked up from the fire she'd been feeding. He'd pulled his bed away from the wall, positioned it closer to the fireplace. It's going to get colder. Cold enough that fire alone won't be enough. We sleep near each other, share warmth. It's survival, not comfort. Her heart kicked, but his expression was utterly neutral. This wasn't desire. This was practicality. She nodded. They made a nest of furs and blankets near the hearth, lay down back to back, maintaining distance but sharing the pocket of warmth their bodies created. Lena stayed awake for a long time, hyper-aware of his presence, his breathing, the solid reality of another human being close enough to touch. But Rowan fell asleep almost immediately, his breathing deep and even. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her too. The storm lasted 5 days. They rationed food, melted snow for water when the barrel ran low, kept the fire fed in careful shifts. The cabin became their entire world, a small island of warmth in an ocean of frozen fury. They talked more during those 5 days than they had in all the weeks before. Small things at first, then larger ones. She learned he'd been a soldier, as the stories said, had fought in the war, seen things that still haunted his sleep,
This
had come
story
home
was
to find his
posted
wife
on the
and
channel
daughter
west
dead from
of Betrayal.
cholera, his farm
Please do not
sold for
repost
taxes,
it in any form.
had packed what little remained and headed west, kept going until there was no more west to go. Some men run from their past, he said quietly. Some men just run. Took me a while to figure out which one I was. Which are you? She asked. He was quiet for a long time. Still figuring that out. She told him about her father, the drinking, the gambling, the way he'd loved her in the moments when he was sober enough to remember she existed. About her mother, dead so long she was more myth than memory. About the uncle who'd sold her to pay debts that weren't even real. The papers were forged, she said. I saw Magnus Reed's signature, same handwriting as the debt notice. They just wanted, I don't know what they wanted, maybe just to be rid of me. Or maybe they're afraid of you, Rowan said. She almost laughed. Afraid of me? Why? Because you're strong, stronger than you know. He looked at her directly. Weak people fear strength in others, reminds them of what they're not. Something in his words settled into her chest and stayed there. On the 5th day, the storm finally broke. They woke to silence, true silence, the kind that only comes after nature has exhausted its fury. Rowan opened the door to a world transformed. Snow had drifted as high as the cabin's eaves on the north side. The pine trees were bent under the weight. Everything was white and still and impossibly beautiful. We'll need to dig out, he said. Could take all day. They worked side by side, shoveling paths to the lean-to, the latrine, the woodpile. The sun came out, painfully bright against the snow. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, but they kept working. By evening, they'd cleared enough to function. They were both exhausted, sweat-soaked despite the cold, muscles trembling. Lena stood by the fire that night, warming her hands, and felt something she hadn't felt in so long she almost didn't recognize it. Purpose, belonging, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Across the cabin, Rowan watched her, his expression thoughtful. You did good today, he said. Real good. So did you. He smiled, actually smiled, the first time she'd seen it. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. We make a decent team, he said. We do, she agreed. And in that moment, something between them crystallized. Not love, not yet, but recognition, understanding, the beginning of something that might, given time, grow into trust. Outside, the mountain settled into its winter silence, patient and eternal. Inside, two people who'd been strangers began, finally, to know each other. Winter deepened its hold on the mountain, but inside the cabin something else was taking root. The silence that had once felt oppressive now carried a different quality. Companionable, almost comfortable. Lena found herself listening for the sound of Rowan's boots on the porch, the way he cleared his throat before speaking, the particular rhythm of his movements as he worked. She didn't examine these observations too closely. Examining them meant acknowledging them, and acknowledgement felt dangerous. Spring was still months away. 3 years stretched ahead like an endless road. It was easier to focus on the day in front of her, the task at hand, the simple mechanics of survival. But the mountain had its own timeline, and it cared nothing for human caution. It started with small things. Rowan began asking her opinion about the trap lines. Which areas had shown the most activity, which pelts were worth the extra effort. At first, she thought he was testing her, but his questions were genuine, his attention real when she answered. You notice things, he said one evening as she described seeing fox tracks near the eastern ridge. Most people look but don't see. You see? The words settled into her chest like warm stones. She started noticing things about him too, the way his jaw tightened when his ankle still pained him, though he never mentioned it. How he always gave her the larger portion of meat at dinner. The fact that he'd quietly moved more blankets to her cot during the big storm, sacrificing his own warmth for hers. Acts without words. Care without declaration. One morning she woke to find him already up, standing at the window with a cup of coffee, staring out at the snow-covered world. Something wrong? She asked, sitting up. No. He didn't turn. Just thinking. She waited, had learned by now that Rowan's silences often preceded his most honest words. "You ever wonder why things happen the way they do?" he asked finally. "Why certain paths cross when they do?" "Sometimes," she said carefully, "I didn't plan to go to that auction." He took a sip of coffee. "Wasn't even supposed to be in town that week. But the supply store had gotten my order wrong, needed me to come back. I was heading out when I heard the commotion in the square." Lena's heart beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. "Why did you bid?" He turned then, looked at her directly. "Because I saw your face. You weren't crying, weren't begging. You were just enduring. Like you'd already decided the world could do its worst, and you'd still be standing when it was done." He paused. "Reminded me of someone." "Who?" "Me. Long time ago." He set down his cup. "I know what it's like to be sold. Not the same way maybe, but close enough. The army owns you just as sure as any debt holder. And when you get out, when you're finally free, you realize you don't know how to be anything but owned anymore. Is that why you came here? To the mountain?" "Part of it." He moved to the fire, added wood. "Out here, the only thing that owns you is the land itself. And the land's honest about it. It'll kill you if you're stupid or weak, but it doesn't lie to you first." Lena rose, began preparing breakfast. Her hands worked automatically while her mind turned over his words. "Do you regret it? Coming here?" "No." The answer was immediate, certain. "This is the first place I've lived instead of just survived." He glanced at her. "What about you? You regret getting bought by a stranger?" She cracked eggs into the pan, watched them sizzle. The question deserved honesty. "I thought I would. Thought I'd spend every day looking for a way to escape." She flipped the eggs carefully. "But this is the first place anyone's ever expected me to be capable instead of ornamental. First place my worth isn't measured by how quiet and small I can make myself." "You're neither quiet nor small," Rowan said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up. "And that's not a criticism." Their eyes held for a moment. Something passed between them, recognition, understanding, the acknowledgement of a truth neither was quite ready to name. Then Rowan cleared his throat and turned away. "Eggs are burning." They weren't, but Lena let him have the deflection. The days rolled forward. February gave way to March, though the cold showed no sign of breaking. Lena learned the rhythm of the trap lines by heart, could predict which areas would be most productive based on weather and wind. She learned to read the mountain's moods, when a storm was coming hours before it hit, when the animals were spooked by something unseen, when the ice on the stream was safe to cross, and when it would crack under weight. Rowan taught her without seeming to teach. He'd mentioned something in passing, how to read animal tracks, how to judge the quality of a pelt, which plants would be edible come spring, and she'd absorb it, store it away. "You learn fast," he said one afternoon as she correctly identified a marten print in fresh snow. "I pay attention." "That you do." He looked at her with something that might have been approval. "Most people see what they expect to see. You see what's actually there." They were checking the northern trap line, moving through forest so quiet the only sounds were their breathing and the crunch of snow under their boots. Rowan had been teaching her how to reset the traps, how to approach them safely, how to dispatch an animal quickly if it was still alive. She'd expected to hate this part, the blood, the death, the necessary cruelty of it. But there was an honesty to it that she found she could respect. The animals died for a purpose. Their pelts would be sold, the money would keep them alive, and nothing was wasted. It was brutal, but it was clean in a way that human dealings never were. "Why did you really buy me?" The question came out before she could stop it. "The real reason?" Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. They checked 2 more traps, both empty, before he spoke. "I told myself it was practical," he said finally, "that I needed help, that $200 for 3 years of labor was a fair trade, that it was just business. And now?" He stopped walking, turned to face her. The forest was utterly still around them, the world holding its breath. "Now I think I was lying to myself." His eyes were steady on hers. "I bought you because leaving you there felt wrong, because I saw something in you that deserved better than what that town was going to do to you, because—" He trailed off, shook his head. Because sometimes you act before you understand why, and you spend the rest of the time trying to figure out if it was wisdom or foolishness.
This story was posted on
Which
the
was it?
channel west of
Still
Betrayal.
figuring that out,
Please do not
but there was a
repost it
warmth
in
in
any
his
form.
voice that hadn't been there before. Ask me in 3 years. They finished the trapline in silence, but it was a different silence now, charged, aware. That night, Lena read longer than usual. Rowan sat in his chair, eyes closed, but she knew he wasn't sleeping. When she finally closed the book, he opened his eyes and looked at her. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being here. For making this place feel less empty." He stood, moved toward his bed, then paused. "I know you didn't choose this. No, you'd probably rather be anywhere else, but I'm glad you're here anyway." Before she could respond, he'd turned down his lamp and settled into bed. Lena sat in the firelight for a long time after, turning his words over in her mind. The strange thing was, she wasn't sure she would rather be anywhere else. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it felt like relief, like permission to stop fighting something she'd been fighting since the day she arrived, like the beginning of choosing instead of just enduring. The next morning brought unexpected company. Lena was outside gathering eggs when she heard the sound, horses, multiple horses, coming up the trail. Her heart leapt into her throat. Company on this mountain was never casual, never accidental. She ran to the cabin. "Rowan, someone's coming!" He was at the door in seconds, rifle in hand. "How many?" "I don't know, at least 2 horses, maybe more." His jaw tightened. "Get inside, stay away from the windows." "What's happening?" "Don't know yet, but people don't ride this far up in winter for friendly visits." He checked his rifle, loaded it with practiced efficiency. "Whatever happens, you stay inside. Understand?" She wanted to argue but nodded instead. 3 riders emerged from the tree line. Lena watched through a crack in the shutter as Rowan stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. The lead rider was a large man bundled in furs. Next to him rode someone smaller, face hidden by a scarf. The third rider hung back, hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "Hail!" the lead rider called out. "Been a long ride. You going to offer coffee or just point that rifle at us all day?" Rowan didn't lower the weapon. "State your business, Carter." Carter. Lena didn't recognize the name, but clearly Rowan did. "Now that's no way to greet an old friend," Carter said, dismounting. "Especially when I've come all this way with news that concerns you." "We're not friends, and I don't care about your news." "You'll care about this." Carter walked closer, stopped when Rowan shifted the rifle slightly. "Easy now. I'm here under flag of truce, so to speak. Just delivering a message. Then deliver it and leave." Carter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Heard you bought yourself a woman down in Bitter Creek. That true?" Lena's blood went cold. "My business is my own," Rowan said flatly. "See? That's where you're wrong." Carter pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Because the woman you bought? She's wanted. Theft charges, fraud. Turns out those debts her father left were paid with stolen money, money that belonged to Magnus Reed." "That's a lie. Got the affidavit right here, signed by a judge. Says she's to be returned to Bitter Creek to face charges." Carter held out the paper. "Now, I know you're a law-abiding man, Hale. You'll do the right thing." Rowan didn't move to take the paper. "You rode 3 days up a mountain in winter to serve legal papers? That's what you expect me to believe?" "I expect you to hand over the woman and avoid trouble." Carter's voice hardened. "Or we can do this the difficult way." "The difficult way gets you buried on my mountain." "You willing to die for some criminal you bought at auction?" Carter's hand moved toward his gun. "Because that's what you're choosing here." The air went razor sharp. Lena could see the third rider easing his horse to the side, trying to get a better angle. The smaller rider remained still, watching. "I'm choosing to protect what's mine," Rowan said quietly. "That paper's as fake as your smile, Carter. Magnus Reed wants her back because she's leverage, because he knows she can testify that those debts were forged. That's what this is really about." Carter's smile disappeared entirely. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first." Rowan's voice dropped lower. "But it'll be your last if you don't turn around and ride back down this mountain. Right now." The tension stretched so tight, Lena thought it would snap. She found herself holding her breath, heart hammering against her ribs. Then the smaller rider spoke, voice muffled by the scarf but clearly female. "He's not bluffing, Carter. I've seen him shoot. You draw, you die." Carter's eyes flicked to the woman, then back to Rowan. Calculation played across his face. Finally, he stepped back. "Fine. We're leaving, but this isn't over, Hale. Magnus Reed doesn't give up easy. He'll send more men. Better men. Let him send an army. Answer will be the same." Carter mounted his horse, jerked the reins hard. "You're signing your death warrant." "Already been dead once," Rowan said. "Didn't take." The three riders turned and headed back down the trail. Rowan stood on the porch until they disappeared into the trees, until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Only then did he lower the rifle. Lena opened the door, stepped out. "What just happened?" Rowan's face was grim. "Trouble. The kind that doesn't go away on its own." He looked at her. "They're coming for you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they're coming." "Why? What do they want from me?" "Not sure yet, but we're going to find out." He moved past her into the cabin. "Pack light. Just what you need for a few days. We're leaving." "Leaving? Where?" "There's a settlement 2 days east. Small place, but they've got a telegraph. I need to send some messages, call in some favors." He was already gathering supplies, moving with military efficiency. "And I need to get you somewhere with witnesses, somewhere they can't just make you disappear." "But the cabin—" "We'll be here when we get back." He stopped, looked at her directly. "Lena, listen to me. What I said to Carter about you being mine, that was strategy. But the part about protecting you, that's real. I don't know what game Magnus Reed is playing, but I'm not letting him win." Something fierce and warm bloomed in her chest. "Why? Why protect me? Your 3 years aren't up. You could just let them take me, wash your hands of the whole thing." "Could," he agreed, "but I won't." He returned to packing. "Now move. We've got maybe 6 hours before they realize we're not staying put." They packed in controlled chaos. Lena grabbed what little she had, wrapped it in a blanket. Rowan filled saddlebags with supplies, checked and rechecked his weapons. Within an hour, they were mounted and moving. The trail east was narrow, treacherous in places where ice had formed. They rode in silence, pushing the horses as fast as the terrain allowed. Lena kept looking back, expecting to see riders pursuing them, but the trail remained empty. "They won't follow," Rowan said, reading her thoughts. "Not yet. Carter's not stupid. He knows I could pick them off one by one in these woods. He'll go back to town, get more men, plan a proper siege." "How much time does that buy us?" "Week. Maybe 2 if we're lucky." They rode until full dark, then made camp in a small cave Rowan seemed to know about. He built a fire at the cave's mouth, positioned to provide warmth but not be visible from the trail. "You've done this before," Lena observed, watching him work. "Once or twice." He didn't elaborate. They ate cold rations, not wanting to risk the smell of cooking food. The cave was dry but cold, the fire barely enough to keep the chill at bay. "Tell me about Magnus Reed," Lena said finally. "What kind of man is he?" Rowan was quiet for a moment, his face shadowed in the firelight. "The kind who believes money makes him untouchable. The kind who'll burn down a forest to catch one rabbit if he thinks it's worth it." He looked at her. "And for some reason he thinks you're worth it. Question is why?" "I don't know anything. I'm nobody." "You're somebody enough that he forged documents to sell you, and somebody enough that he wants you back when you're gone." Rowan fed more wood to the fire. "What did your father do, before he died?" "He drank mostly, worked odd jobs when he sobered up enough." She tried to remember. "There was one job he had for about 6 months, working as a clerk for Reed's mining office. But he got fired when they caught him drinking on the job." "Mining office?" Rowan's eyes sharpened. "What did he do there?" "Kept books, I think. Filed claims. I don't know exactly. He didn't talk about work much." "Did he bring anything home? Papers, ledgers, anything like that?" Lena thought back. There was a ledger, a small one. He kept it in his coat pocket, used to write in it at night when he thought I was sleeping. I asked him about it once, and he told me to mind my business." "Where is it now?" "I don't know. After he died, my uncle went through everything, said he was looking for assets to pay the debts. I never saw the ledger again." Rowan nodded slowly, pieces fitting together in his mind. Your father saw something. Something Reed didn't want seen. That ledger probably
This
had
story
evidence
was
of it.
posted on the
False
channel
claims,
west
stolen
of
property,
Betrayal.
something worth
Please
killing
do not
for.
repost it in any
You think
form.
Reed killed my father? I think your father drank himself to death, but I think Reed helped the process along. And I think he sold you to make sure you couldn't ask questions he didn't want answered. He met her eyes. But you got bought by the wrong man. Now he's got a problem. I'm not worth dying for, Lena said quietly. If they come with an army like Carter said, they won't get you. His voice was iron. I made you a promise. 3 years of safety in exchange for 3 years of work. I keep my promises. Even if it costs you everything? He smiled, but it was grim. Everything's not worth much when you've already lost everything that mattered. This cabin, these mountains, they're just a place. You're a person. Difference is significant. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Thank you, Lena said finally, for not asking if I'm guilty, for just believing me. You didn't steal anything. I've lived with you for 2 months. I know who you are. He adjusted his coat, settled back against the cave wall. Get some sleep. We've got another hard day tomorrow. But sleep was impossible. Lena lay wrapped in her blanket, staring at the cave ceiling, mind racing. Everything had changed in the space of a few hours. The fragile peace she'd built on the mountain was shattered. The future that had seemed to stretch ahead in simple, predictable days was now uncertain, dangerous. And Rowan, steady, silent Rowan, had stepped between her and the threat without hesitation. Why? The question circled in her mind. He'd given practical answers, talked about promises and principles. But there was something else beneath the surface, something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. She turned her head, looked at him across the fire. His eyes were closed, but she knew he wasn't sleeping. His hand rested on the rifle beside him, ready. Rowan? Yeah? What happens if we can't prove Reed forged those documents? What if the law sides with him? Then we don't rely on the law. His eyes opened, found hers. There's more than one kind of justice in the world, Lena, and I'm familiar with most of them. It should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like safety. She closed her eyes and eventually, finally, slept. They reached the settlement of Pine Ridge late the next afternoon. It was barely a town, a dozen buildings clustered around a trading post, a blacksmith, and a small telegraph office. But it had people, and people meant witnesses. Rowan went straight to the telegraph office while Lena waited with the horses. He was inside for 20 minutes, and when he emerged, his face was set in hard lines. What did you find out? She asked. Reed's been busy. He's put out word you're a fugitive, offered a reward for your return. And he's got the territorial marshal looking into it, a man named Sutton, who happens to owe Reed more than one favor. He helped her dismount. We've got less time than I thought. What did you send? Messages to people who owe me favors. Former army men, mostly. Good men who will stand against corruption if given half a reason. He led the horses toward the livery. And I sent one to a lawyer in Denver, man I served with who knows how to fight dirty when necessary. They arranged for the horses to be stabled, then Rowan led her to the trading post. The owner, a weathered man named Dutch, greeted Rowan with genuine warmth. Hail! Didn't expect to see you till spring. His eyes flicked to Lena, curious but not unkind. Unexpected business, Rowan said. Need a place to stay for a few days. You still rent that room above the store? For you? Always. Dutch's expression turned serious. Heard there's men asking about you down in Bitter Creek. That the business, you mean? Part of it. Dutch nodded slowly. Room's yours as long as you need it. And Hale, whatever trouble's coming, you've got friends here. Remember that. The room was small but clean, with a single bed and a chair. Rowan took the chair without discussion, began cleaning his rifle. Lena sat on the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. How long do we wait? For the responses? Could be days, could be weeks. He worked methodically, his hands sure. In the meantime, we stay visible. Let people see you're here willingly, not being held against your will. Makes it harder for Reed to claim you've been kidnapped. And if he sends men here? Then we find out who in Pine Ridge can be bought and who can't. He looked up. But I don't think he will. Too many witnesses, too many questions. He'll try to force this through legal channels first. Only when that fails will he get desperate. A knock at the door made them both tense. Rowan stood, rifle ready, positioned himself to one side. Yeah? It's Mary, Dutch's wife, brought dinner. Rowan opened the door carefully. The woman on the other side was older, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen their share of trouble. She carried a tray covered with a cloth. Figured you'd be hungry. She came in, set the tray on the small table. You must be the woman everyone's talking about. Lena stood. I'm Lena. Mary. The woman studied her frankly. Dutch says you're in some kind of trouble. That true? Yes, ma'am. You guilty of what they're saying? No, ma'am. Mary nodded, seemed satisfied. Didn't think so. Man like Hale doesn't protect guilty people. He's got too much honor for that. She turned to Rowan. There's a town meeting tonight. Folks want to know what's happening. You should speak. Not sure that's wise. Wiser than letting rumors fill the gaps. Mary moved toward the door. 7 o'clock trading post, be there. She left before Rowan could argue. Town meeting, Lena said. That's good, right? Means people care? Means people are curious. Curiosity cuts both ways. But he was thinking, calculating. She's right, though. Better to control the story than let Reed control it for us. That evening, they walked to the trading post together. The main room had been cleared, chairs arranged in rough rows. 20 people were already there, with more arriving. Lena recognized the type. Frontier folk, weathered and wary, but not unkind. Dutch called the meeting to order. Most of you know Rowan Hale. He's got something to say. I'd appreciate it if you'd hear him out. Rowan stood, and the room went quiet. He had that effect, commanded attention without demanding it. I'll keep this simple, he said. This is Lena Holloway. I bought her contract in Bitter Creek 2 months ago to work off her father's debts. She's been living on my claim, working as agreed. Now there are men saying she's wanted for theft, saying she needs to be returned to face charges. He paused, let that sink in. But the charges are false. The debts her father supposedly owed were forged by Magnus Reed to justify taking her property and selling her when she couldn't pay. When I took her out of his reach, he decided to come after her using the law he'd already corrupted. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Why should we believe you? A man in the back called out. Because you know me, Rowan said simply. I've traded here for 5 years. Ever lied to any of you? Ever cheated you? Ever caused trouble? Heads shook. Dutch spoke up. Hale's a straight dealer. If he says something's true, it's true. The question before you, Rowan continued, is whether you're going to let Reed use this settlement to do his dirty work. Whether you're going to let corrupt men from down the valley decide what's justice up here. Because, make no mistake, if you let them take Lena without proof, without trial, you're setting a precedent that affects all of you. He looked around the room, made eye contact with as many people as he could. I'm not asking you to fight my battles. I'm asking you to stand for what's right. Let Lena stay here, in plain sight, while the law sorts itself out properly. Let her have witnesses to her character. And if Reed's charges have merit, let them be proven in an honest court, not enforced by men with guns and forged papers. Silence. Then Mary stood. I say she stays. Anyone Reed hates that much can't be all bad. Laughter, tense but real. Others stood, voiced their agreement. Not everyone, some remained seated, silent, perhaps bought already or just too afraid to take a stand. But enough. Enough to matter. Dutch banged his hand on the counter. Then it's settled. Lena Holloway is under Pine Ridge's protection until this gets sorted proper. Anyone got a problem with that? No one spoke. Good, Dutch said. Meeting's over. Mary's got coffee if anyone wants to stay and talk. As people milled about, several approached Lena directly, offered words of support, shared their own stories of being wronged by powerful men, made it clear she wasn't alone. Rowan stood to the side watching, and when Lena caught his eye, he nodded slightly. They'd won the first battle, but both of them knew the war was just beginning. 3 days passed in tense waiting. Lena helped Mary in the trading post, sorting inventory and serving customers, making herself visible and useful. Each person who came through became a witness to her character, to the fact that she was no criminal, but simply a woman trying to survive. Rowan spent his time talking quietly with the men of Pine Ridge, former soldiers mostly, men who understood what it meant to stand against corruption. Lena would catch glimpses of these conversations, serious
This story
faces,
was posted on the
nodding
channel
heads,
west of Betrayal.
hands shaken in
Please do not
solidarity.
repost it
An
in any
army was
form.
forming, small but committed. On the fourth morning, the telegraph operator came running to the trading post, his face flushed with exertion. "Hail! Message came through for you." Rowan took the telegram, read it quickly. His expression didn't change, but Lena had learned to read the subtle shifts in his posture. This was bad news. "What is it?" she asked when the operator had left. "Marshal Sutton's coming, due to arrive tomorrow with federal authority to take you into custody." He folded the telegram carefully. "And there's more. Reed's offered $1,000 to anyone who delivers you to Bitter Creek before Sutton arrives." $1,000? In Pine Ridge, that was enough money to change a life, enough to tempt even honest men. "We should run," Lena said. "Tonight, before—" "No." Rowan's voice was firm. "Running makes you look guilty, and there's nowhere to run that Reed can't follow." He looked at her directly. "We stand and fight. Here, where you've got people who've seen the truth. Against a federal marshal? Against corrupt men using federal authority to cover their crimes." He moved toward the door. "I need to talk to Dutch. You stay here with Mary. Don't go anywhere alone." The day crawled by like something wounded. Lena tried to work, tried to keep her hands busy, but her mind kept spinning through scenarios, each worse than the last. What if the town turned on her? What if the $1,000 was too much to resist? What if Rowan's faith in these people was misplaced? That evening, Dutch called another meeting. The trading post filled quickly, tension thick enough to taste. "You all know why we're here," Dutch began. "Marshall's coming tomorrow with papers to take Lena Holloway. Question is what we're going to do about it." "Nothing we can do," someone said from the back. "Man's got federal authority. We interfere, we're all criminals." "Federal authority bought and paid for by Magnus Reed," Rowan countered. "That Marshall's in Reed's pocket. Everyone knows it." "Knowing it and proving it are different things," another voice called out. "Then we demand proof," Mary said, standing. "We don't let him just take her. We make him show his evidence, present his case right here where we can all witness it. That's not how the law works." "Then maybe the law needs to work different," Mary shot back. "This girl's done nothing wrong. I've watched her for days now. She's honest, hardworking, respectful. You telling me we're just going to hand her over to men we know are corrupt because they've got fancy papers?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but doubt remained visible on many faces. Rowan stepped forward. "I'm not asking anyone to break the law. I'm asking for witnesses. When Sutton arrives, I want every person in this room present. I want you to hear what he says, see what evidence he has. And I want you to remember what you've seen here, that Lena Holloway is no criminal." "And if Sutton has real evidence," someone challenged, "then I'll hand her over myself," Rowan said quietly. "But if he doesn't, if he's just here to do Reed's dirty work, then I'm asking you to stand with me in demanding real justice, not bought and paid for corruption." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Dutch spoke. "Show of hands. Who's willing to be a witness tomorrow?" Slowly, hands rose. Not everyone, but enough. More than half the room. "Good," Dutch said. "Then we meet here at noon. Everyone who raised their hand, you be here. We're going to show Marshal Sutton that Pine Ridge doesn't roll over for corrupt authority." As people filed out, several stopped to speak with Lena. An older woman pressed a small carved cross into her hand. A young man told her his sister had been cheated by Reed's land office. A couple offered to let her stay with them if she needed a place to hide. "You've made an impression," Mary said quietly, watching the crowd disperse. "People here know injustice when they see it. They've all lived through it one way or another." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay on the bed in the small room, listening to Rowan's steady breathing from the chair where he kept watch. The rifle never left his hands. His vigilance never wavered. "You should sleep," she whispered. "Tomorrow I need to be sharp," he agreed. "But I've gone longer on less sleep. I'll manage." She sat up, pulled the blanket around her shoulders. "Why are you doing this? Really? Not the practical reasons, not the promises. Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he shifted, and even in the darkness she could feel his eyes on her. Because the last time I stood by and did nothing, I lost everything that mattered, he said, his voice rough with old pain. My wife, my daughter. They died while I was away fighting someone else's war. I came home to graves and unpaid taxes and a farm sold out from under them. I learned too late that doing the right thing for the wrong people means nothing if you fail the people who actually need you. He paused, and Lena heard him take a slow breath. I'm not standing by this time. I'm not letting corrupt men destroy someone just because they can. I'm choosing to fight for something that matters. His voice softened slightly. And you matter, Lena. Maybe you don't see it yet, but you do. Her throat tightened with emotion too complicated to name. I'm nobody. Just a girl who got sold because her father was a drunk and her uncle was greedy. You're the woman who survived being sold and didn't break, who learned a mountain in 2 months, who stands up straight even when the world tells you to bow. She heard him shift in his chair. You're the reason I remember there's still something worth protecting in this world. The words settled into her chest like embers, warm and dangerous and impossible to ignore. If tomorrow goes badly, she started. It won't. But if it does, I want you to know. She struggled to find the right words. I want you to know that these last 2 months have been the first time in my life I felt like I mattered, like I was more than just something to be used up and thrown away. You did that. You gave me that. You did that yourself, Rowan said quietly. I just gave you space to be who you already were. They sat in silence for a while, the darkness holding them like cupped hands. Try to sleep, Rowan said finally. Whatever comes tomorrow, we face it rested. This time, Lena closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. Her last conscious thought was that whatever happened, she wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. Morning came too quickly and too bright. Lena woke to find Rowan already up, cleaned and dressed, checking his weapons with methodical precision. He looked like he was preparing for war, and she supposed he was. Eat something, he said without looking up. Going to be a long day. Mary had sent up breakfast, bread, eggs, coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. Lena forced herself to eat, though her stomach was twisted in knots. What's the plan? She asked. We walk into that meeting with our heads up. We let Sutton make his case, and we trust that the truth is stronger than Reed's money. He finally looked at her. But if things go wrong, if it looks like they're going to take you by force, you run. There's a trail behind the trading post that leads into the high country. You take it, don't look back. I'll find you when it's safe. I won't leave you. You will if I tell you to. His voice was hard. I can handle myself, Lena, but I can't handle losing you to Reed. Promise me that if it comes to it, you'll run. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. I promise. Good. He stood, offered his hand. Then let's go show these bastards what courage looks like. They walked to the trading post together, and Lena felt every eye in Pine Ridge watching. Word had spread. The whole settlement knew what was about to happen. Some faces showed support, others curiosity. A few showed naked greed. That $1,000 reward was a fortune, and not everyone's loyalty could withstand that kind of temptation. The trading post was packed. Dutch had arranged chairs in a semicircle facing the door, and every seat was taken. People stood along the walls, crowded in the doorway. The air was thick with tension and too many bodies. Rowan led Lena to 2 chairs in the center, positioned so she could see the door but also had people at her back. Protection or witness, she wasn't sure which. At exactly noon, horses approached. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs as the door opened. Marshal Sutton was exactly what she'd expected. A hard man in his 50s with cold eyes and a badge that gleamed like a threat. Behind him came 2 deputies, both armed, and behind them, smiling like a wolf, came Victor Crane. Her uncle's presence hit her like a physical blow. She'd known he was part of this, but seeing him here, in the flesh, made it real in a way nothing else had. Well now, Sutton said, his voice carrying easily through the room. This is quite the welcoming committee. We're witnesses, Dutch said from his position near the front. Pine Ridge takes justice seriously. Justice. Sutton's smile was thin. That's exactly what I'm here to provide. His eyes found Lena. Lena Holloway, you're under arrest for theft and fraud. You'll be coming with me to Bitter Creek to stand trial. On what evidence? Rowan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. On the evidence of signed affidavits, witness testimony, and documented debts, Sutton pulled papers from his coat. All properly filed with the territorial court.
This story was
Let's see them,
posted on the
Dutch
channel
said.
west of Betrayal.
Right here.
Please
where
do
we
not
can all read
repost
them.
it in any form.
Sutton's jaw tightened, but he handed the papers to Dutch. The room waited in silence as Dutch read, his expression growing darker with each page. This says Lena's father stole $3,000 from Magnus Reed's mining office, Dutch said finally. Says he used it to pay off gambling debts, and when Reed discovered the theft, the father killed himself out of guilt. He looked up. Says Lena knew about the theft and helped hide the money. That's a lie! Lena stood, her voice shaking but strong. My father never had $3,000 in his life. He was a drunk and a gambler, but he wasn't a thief. The evidence says otherwise, Victor spoke for the first time, his voice dripping with false sympathy. I know it's hard to accept, girl, but your father was a criminal, and you profited from his crimes. You forged those debts, Lena shot back. You and Magnus Reed, you sold me to pay debts that never existed. Careful with your accusations, Sutton warned. Slander's a crime too. It's not slander if it's true, Rowan said quietly. And here's what's true, Marshall. Magnus Reed wanted Lena's property. Her father had worked in Reed's office and likely saw something he shouldn't have. So Reed manufactured debts, had the father killed or driven to drink himself to death, and then sold the daughter to cover his tracks. That's one hell of a conspiracy theory, Sutton said. You got any proof? Do you? Rowan countered. Real proof, not just papers that could have been forged by anyone with access to Reed's office. Sutton's hand moved toward his gun. I've got federal authority. That's all the proof I need. Federal authority bought with Reed's money, Mary called out. Everyone in this territory knows you're in his pocket, Sutton. The marshal's face flushed red. That's enough. I'm taking the prisoner, and anyone who interferes will be arrested too. Then arrest me, Dutch said, standing, because I'm not letting you take her without real evidence. Me too, Mary said, standing beside her husband. Others rose. One by one, the people of Pine Ridge who'd raised their hands the night before stood in solidarity. Sutton looked around the room, his expression calculating. He was outnumbered, but he had the law on his side. The question was whether he was willing to push it to violence. This is obstruction of justice, he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. This is justice, Rowan said. Real justice, not the kind Reed buys. You want to take Lena? Fine. But you do it in front of all these witnesses, and you explain to them how a girl with no money, no education, no opportunity could have stolen and hidden $3,000 without anyone noticing. Her uncle noticed, Sutton gestured to Victor. He's the one who brought the crime to light. Her uncle who stood to inherit her property if she was convicted or sold, Rowan said. Quite the coincidence. Victor's face went dark. You're calling me a liar? I'm calling you what you are, Rowan said calmly. A greedy man who sold his own niece to line his pockets. Victor's hand went to his gun, but one of Sutton's deputies grabbed his arm. Easy. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Lena could feel it, like a rope pulled too tight, ready to snap. Someone was going to draw, someone was going to shoot, and then everything would explode into violence. She stood, her voice cutting through the moment like a bell. I'll go. Every head turned to her. Rowan's face went white. Lena, no. I'll go with the marshal, she continued, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. But on one condition. You're not in a position to make conditions, Sutton said. I am if you want this to end without bloodshed. She looked around the room at all the faces watching her. I'll go to Bitter Creek and stand trial, but I demand a real trial. A jury, witnesses, the chance to defend myself, not just a conviction bought and paid for by Magnus Reed. Sutton considered this. It was a reasonable request, one he couldn't refuse in front of so many witnesses without revealing the corruption everyone suspected. You'll get a trial, he said finally, and I want Rowan Hale as my advocate. He speaks for me, presents my defense. That's not how... That's my condition, Lena said firmly. You take me now. Rowan comes with us. Or you try to take me by force and see how that works out with all these witnesses. Sutton looked at Rowan, at the room full of armed men who'd stood in solidarity, at the situation that was rapidly slipping out of his control. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Hale can speak for you, but we leave now, and if you try to run, I'll shoot you myself." "I won't run," Lena said. "I'm done running." Rowan stood, his face tight with anger and something else, fear, she realized. He was afraid for her. "Give me a moment with her," he said to Sutton. The marshal nodded curtly. Rowan pulled Lena aside, his hands on her shoulders. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly, urgently. "What you taught me," she said. "Fighting for what's right, standing up instead of bowing down." She met his eyes. "You can't protect me forever, Rowan. Eventually I have to protect myself. This is me doing that. They'll convict you. Reed owns that town. Maybe, or maybe having you there, having witnesses, having the truth on our side will be enough." She touched his hand briefly. "You told me I was stronger than I knew. Time to prove it." His jaw worked, emotions playing across his face too fast to name. Finally he nodded. "All right, but I'm with you every step, and if they try anything—" "I know," she said softly. "You'll burn the world down, but maybe we won't need to. Maybe the truth will be enough." They gathered their things quickly. Lena had nothing but the clothes Rowan had given her, the coat that still smelled like his cabin, the life she'd built in 2 short months on a mountain that felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever been. As they walked out of the trading post, the people of Pine Ridge lined the street. Some called out words of encouragement. Others just watched, silent witnesses to whatever came next. Mary pressed something into Lena's hand as they passed, a small knife, easily concealed. "Just in case," she whispered. Dutch gripped Rowan's shoulder. "You bring her back safe, you hear?" "I will," Rowan promised. "One way or another." They mounted horses. Lena on a spare mare, Rowan on his roan, Sutton and his deputies surrounding them like guards. Victor rode ahead, his satisfaction barely concealed. As they left Pine Ridge behind, Lena looked back once. The settlement was small, barely a smudge against the vast wilderness. But it had given her something precious. The knowledge that there were still good people in the world. People willing to stand against corruption, willing to fight for what was right even when it cost them something. She turned forward toward whatever waited in Bitter Creek and straightened her spine. The journey took 2 days. They rode in tense silence, camping each night with Lena under constant watch. Sutton posted guards, though whether to protect her or prevent her escape she couldn't tell. Rowan stayed close, his presence a constant reassurance. At night, when the others slept, he would move nearer to where she lay, his rifle ready, his vigilance absolute. "Thank you," she whispered on the second night, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet," he said quietly. "This isn't over." "But if it goes badly—" "It won't." His voice was firm. "I didn't pull you off that auction platform just to lose you to Reed's corruption. We're going to win this, Lena. I promise you that." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in his certainty, his strength, his unwavering commitment to protecting her. But as Bitter Creek came into view on the 3rd morning, the same town where she'd been chained and mocked and sold like property, doubt crept cold fingers around her heart. The town square looked exactly as she remembered. The auction platform still stood, empty now but stained with memories. People stopped to stare as they rode through, whispers following in their wake. Sutton led them to the sheriff's office, a squat building near the center of town. The sheriff himself came out, a different man than before, younger, with eyes that darted nervously between Sutton and Rowan. "This the Holloway girl?" he asked. "Prisoner Holloway," Sutton corrected. "Lock her up. Trial's set for tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" Rowan's voice was sharp. "That's not enough time to prepare a defense." "It's enough time for the truth to come out," Sutton said. "Unless you're planning to manufacture a defense?" "I'm planning to expose your corruption," Rowan shot back. Sutton smiled coldly. "Good luck with that." They took Lena to a cell in the back, small, cold, with bars that had held how many other desperate people before her. She walked in with her head high, refused to let them see her fear. Rowan tried to follow, but Sutton blocked him. "Prisoner gets no visitors until trial." "I'm her advocate. I have a right—" "You have the right to speak in court tomorrow. That's all." Sutton gestured to his deputies. "Show Mr. Hale out." Rowan's hand moved toward his gun, but Lena spoke quickly. It's all right. I'll see you tomorrow. Their eyes met through the bars. In his gaze, she saw promise, fury, and something deeper, something that made her chest ache.
This story was posted
Tomorrow,
on the channel
he
west
said.
of Betrayal.
Lena,
Please
don't
do
give
not
up.
repost
Not for a
it
second.
in any form.
I won't, she promised. They led him away, and she was alone. The hours crawled by. No one brought food or water. No one came to check on her. She was simply left in the cold and dark, alone with her thoughts and fears. Night fell. Lena sat on the thin cot, wrapped in the coat Rowan had given her, and tried not to think about what tomorrow would bring. Tried not to imagine the trial, the conviction, the sentence. Tried not to think about never seeing Rowan again, never returning to that cabin on the mountain where she'd finally felt like she belonged. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. She looked up, expecting the sheriff or maybe Sutton come to gloat. Instead, Victor Crane stood outside her cell, smiling. "Hello, niece," he said, the word dripping with mockery. "I thought we should talk. Uncle to niece. Family, after all." Lena stood slowly, keeping her distance from the bars. "We're not family. We never were." "Oh, but we are. Blood relation. Isn't that what matters?" His smile widened. "I wanted to give you a chance, one last opportunity to make this easy on yourself." "Easy how?" "Confess. Admit you knew about your father's theft, that you helped him hide the money. Do that, and Reed might be persuaded to ask for leniency. Say 5 years instead of hanging." "I didn't steal anything." "No one cares what you did or didn't do," Victor said, his mask of pleasantness slipping. "This is about what Reed wants, and he wants you convicted, your property seized, and this whole matter buried. Your mountain man can't save you. The town's already turned against him. Tomorrow, you'll be found guilty, and that'll be the end of it." "Or," Lena said quietly, "tomorrow the truth comes out, and everyone sees you and Reed for the criminals you are." Victor's expression turned ugly. "You think you're strong now? Think having that man care about you makes you special?" He leaned closer to the bars. "Let me tell you something, girl. Strength doesn't matter when you're at the end of a rope, and that's where you're headed." "Get out," Lena said, her voice steady despite the fear. "Tomorrow," Victor said, turning to leave. "Tomorrow you'll wish you'd taken my offer, but it'll be too late then." He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Lena alone once more. She sat back down on the cot, her heart racing. Victor's visit had been meant to break her, to make her doubt, to steal her courage. Instead, it had done the opposite, because his desperation was showing. His need to make her confess, to secure the conviction before trial, meant he was afraid the truth might actually come out, afraid Rowan might find a way to expose the corruption, afraid they might actually win. Lena pulled the small knife Mary had given her from where she'd hidden it in her boot. It wasn't much, barely more than a letter opener, but it was something, a weapon, a choice. She wouldn't use it unless she had no other option. But knowing it was there, knowing she wasn't completely helpless, gave her strength. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow she would stand in front of the town that had sold her and demand they see the truth. And whatever happened, she would face it standing up, just like Rowan had taught her. Dawn broke gray and cold over Bitter Creek. Lena watched it through the small barred window of her cell, counting her heartbeats, steadying her breathing. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep with Victor's threats echoing in her mind, and tomorrow transformed into today. The door to the cells opened with a metallic
This story
groan.
was posted
The
on the
young
channel
sheriff
west
appeared,
of
carrying a tin
Betrayal.
cup of water
Please
and a
do not
piece of hard
repost
bread.
it in any form.
"Trial starts in 2 hours," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Thought you might want to eat something." Lena took the offerings through the bars. "Thank you." He hesitated, glanced back toward the front office, then leaned slightly closer. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're guilty. But what I think doesn't matter much in this town." "It matters," Lena said quietly. "Every voice that speaks truth matters, even if it's just a whisper." He nodded once, then left her alone again. She ate the bread slowly, making it last, and drank the water in small sips. Her stomach rebelled against the food, twisted tight with nerves, but she forced it down anyway. Rowan had taught her that survival started with practical things: food, water, warmth. The rest could wait. An hour later, they came for her. Sutton himself opened the cell, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. "Time to go," he said. "And just so we're clear, you try anything, say anything out of line, and I'll have you gagged and bound. Understood?" "Understood," Lena said, stepping out of the cell with her head high. They walked through town toward the courthouse, a journey that felt like walking to an execution. People lined the streets, watching with the same morbid curiosity they'd shown at the auction. Some faces held sympathy, others satisfaction. Most just looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes. The courthouse was the largest building in Bitter Creek, a two-story structure that served as both government office and gathering hall. Inside, the main room had been arranged like a proper courtroom, with benches for spectators, a raised platform for the judge, and a small area roped off for the accused. The room was already packed. Lena saw Magnus Reed in the front row, dressed in his finest suit, looking like a respectable businessman instead of the corrupt predator he was. Victor sat beside him, that same ugly smile on his face. And then she saw Rowan. He stood near the front, dressed in clean clothes she'd never seen him wear, a dark coat, pressed shirt, his hair combed back. He looked different, almost civilized, but his eyes were the same, hard, focused, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Their eyes met across the crowded room. He nodded once, a tiny movement that said everything he couldn't speak aloud. "I'm here. I'm fighting. Don't give up." She nodded back, straightening her spine, lifting her chin. Sutton led her to the defendant's area and positioned himself nearby, hand resting casually on his pistol. A reminder that she was a prisoner, that any move toward escape would be met with violence. The room settled into expectant silence as a man in judge's robes entered through a side door. Judge Harrison. Lena recognized him from town, an older man with white hair and a face carved by years of making difficult decisions. Whether those decisions had been honest or bought, she didn't know yet. "This court is now in session," Harrison announced, his voice carrying easily. "We're here to hear the case of the Territory versus Lana Holloway, accused of theft and conspiracy to commit fraud. How does the defendant plead?" Rowan stepped forward before Lena could speak. "Your Honor, I'm speaking on behalf of Miss Holloway. She pleads not guilty to all charges." Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're not a lawyer, Mr. Hale." "No, Your Honor. But the defendant has the right to choose her advocate, and she's chosen me. Unless the court intends to deny her that right." A murmur ran through the crowd. Harrison looked annoyed but gestured for Rowan to continue. "Very well, the prosecution may present its case." A lawyer Lena had never seen before stood, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who practically reeked of Reed's money. His name, he announced, was Charles Blackwood, and he represented the interests of Justice and Magnus Reed. "Your Honor, the facts of this case are simple and damning," Blackwood began, his voice smooth as oil. "The defendant's father, Thomas Holloway, worked as a clerk in Mr. Reed's mining office. During his employment, he stole $3,000 from the company's safe, money that belonged to honest miners and investors. When confronted with evidence of his crime, Thomas Holloway took his own life rather than face justice." Lena's hands clenched into fists. Every word was a lie, but Blackwood delivered them with such conviction that she could see people in the audience nodding along. The defendant, Lena Holloway, was complicit in her father's crimes. She helped him hide the money, spent portions of it on herself, and when Mr. Reed attempted to recover what was stolen, she fled. Only through the diligent efforts of Marshal Sutton was she apprehended and brought here to face the consequences of her actions. Blackwood pulled out papers, waved them like proof. "We have signed affidavits, financial records, testimony from respected members of this community. The evidence is overwhelming." He sat down looking satisfied. Harrison looked at Rowan. "Mr. Hale, do you wish to cross-examine?" "I do, Your Honor." Rowan stood, and suddenly the civilized appearance fell away. He moved like a predator, every step deliberate. "Mr. Blackwood, you mentioned financial records. May I see them?" Blackwood handed over a ledger. Rowan studied it carefully, his expression unreadable. The courtroom waited in tense silence. "This ledger shows a withdrawal of $3,000 on February 10th, signed by Thomas Holloway," Rowan said finally. "Is that correct?" "It is." "And Thomas Holloway died on February 8th, 2 days before this alleged theft." Rowan looked up, his eyes sharp. How does a
This
dead man
story was
steal money?
posted on the channel
The courtroom
West of
erupted.
Betrayal.
Blackwood's face
Please do
went
not
pale,
repost it
then
in any
red.
form.
There must be an error in the date. An error? Rowan's voice cut through the noise. Or a forgery? Because it seems to me that your entire case rests on documents that claim a dead man committed a crime. Harrison banged his gavel. Order. Mr. Blackwood, explain this discrepancy. Your Honor, the dates may have been recorded incorrectly, but the theft itself is well documented. By whom? Rowan demanded. Who actually witnessed Thomas Holloway taking this money? Who saw him with $3,000? Who can testify to anything beyond papers that are clearly falsified? Blackwood looked to Reed, who leaned forward and whispered something. The lawyer straightened. We have testimony from the defendant's own uncle, Victor Crane, who discovered the theft after his brother-in-law's death. Then call him, Rowan said. Let's hear what he has to say. Victor was sworn in, took his place with the same confident smile he'd worn at the jail. But Lena saw the nervousness in his eyes, the way his hands gripped the chair arms too tightly. Mr. Crane, Blackwood began, please tell the court what you discovered after Thomas Holloway's death. I went to his house to help my niece settle his affairs, Victor said, his voice dripping false sympathy. That's when I found the money, $3,000 hidden in his mattress. I knew immediately something was wrong. Thomas never had that kind of money, honestly. And what did you do? I reported it to Mr. Reed, of course, told him what I'd found. He checked his books and discovered the theft. We tried to handle it quietly, for the family's sake, but Lena refused to cooperate. Lies, Lena said, standing. All of it lies. Harrison banged his gavel. The defendant will remain silent or be removed. Rowan put a hand on Lena's shoulder, gentle but firm. She sat down, shaking with rage and fear. Your witness, Mr. Hale, Harrison said. Rowan approached Victor slowly, like a wolf circling prey. Mr. Crane, you say you found $3,000 in Thomas Holloway's mattress? That's right. That's a lot of money. Heavy, too. Where is it now? Victor blinked. I gave it to Mr. Reed, of course, returned what was stolen. Of course, Rowan nodded. And do you have any proof you actually found this money? Any witnesses who saw it? I didn't need witnesses. I knew what I saw. How convenient. Rowan moved closer. Tell me, Mr. Crane, what happened to Lena Holloway's property after her father died? What do you mean? I mean the house she lived in, the land it sat on. Small plot, but valuable. What happened to it? Victor's jaw tightened. It was sold to pay Thomas's debts. Debts to Magnus Reed, Rowan clarified. And who bought the property? I don't see what that has to do with... Answer the question, Mr. Crane, Harrison interjected. I did, Victor said. I bought it fair and square. For how much? $50. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. $50 for property worth at least $500. $50, Rowan repeated. And then what did you do with it? I sold it. To whom? Victor's face had gone red. To Mr. Reed. He needed it for mining expansion. For how much? Silence. Victor looked at Reed, at Blackwood, anywhere but at Rowan. How much did Magnus Reed pay you for property you bought for $50? Rowan pressed. $500, Victor finally admitted. The courtroom exploded. Harrison's gavel cracked like thunder, but
This
it took
story was
minutes to
posted
restore
on the channel
order.
West of Betrayal.
So let me understand
Please
this,
do not
Rowan
repost
said,
it
his
in
voice
any
cutting
form.
through the noise. You found $3,000 that you claim was stolen. You returned it to Reed without any proof it existed. Then you bought your niece's property for a fraction of its worth and immediately sold it to Reed for 10 times what you paid. And we're supposed to believe this was all about justice? I was settling legitimate debts, Victor shouted. What debts? Show me the original loan documents. Show me Thomas Holloway's signature on anything that proves he owed Magnus Reed a single dollar. They were lost in a fire. How convenient, Rowan said coldly. Everything that might prove your innocence is lost or destroyed, but everything that condemns Lena Holloway is perfectly preserved. He turned to face the courtroom, his voice rising. This isn't about theft. This is about a powerful man stealing from a powerless woman. Magnus Reed wanted Lena's property, so he manufactured debts, forged documents, and when she couldn't pay, he had her sold like livestock. And when that didn't work, When she escaped his reach, he brought false charges to drag her back and finish what he started. "That's defamation!" Blackwood shouted. "Your Honor, I demand—" "You'll get your turn," Harrison said, but his expression had changed. He was looking at the evidence differently now, seeing the holes that Rowan had exposed. "I call Magnus Reed to the stand," Rowan said. Blackwood started to object, but Reed stood, confident and smiling. "I have nothing to hide." He took the stand with the ease of a man who believed himself untouchable. Lena watched him, this man who'd tried to destroy her life, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear anymore. Anger. Clean, pure, righteous anger. "Mr. Reed," Rowan began, "you claim Thomas Holloway stole $3,000 from you?" "I don't claim it. It's fact." "Then show me the original deposit record. Show me proof that $3,000 ever existed in your safe to be stolen." Reed's smile faltered slightly. "My accounting books show—" "Your accounting books that you control, that you could alter at any time." Rowan shook his head. "I want original bank records, deposits, withdrawals, something independent that proves this money existed." "I don't keep my money in banks," Reed said. "Too many fees, too much government interference." "How convenient," Rowan said again. "So we only have your word that this money existed at all." "My word should be sufficient. I'm a respected businessman. You're a man who profits from other people's misery," Rowan interrupted. "You buy up properties for pennies when families fall on hard times. You extend credit at impossible rates and then seize everything when they can't pay. Half the businesses in this town are owned by you through exactly this kind of manipulation." "Business is business," Reed said, his veneer of pleasantness cracking. "If people can't manage their affairs, that's not my fault." "But inventing debts that don't exist, that is your fault." Rowan leaned forward. "Tell me, Mr. Reed, why did you really want Lena Holloway's property?" "I didn't particularly want it. I was simply recovering what was owed." "Nothing was owed!" Lena stood again, unable to contain herself. "My father worked for you for 6 months and you fired him for drinking. That's all. There was no debt, no theft, nothing but your greed." "Sit down." Sutton moved toward her, but Rowan stepped between them. "Let her speak," Rowan said. "She has that right." Harrison hesitated, then nodded. "Miss Holloway, you may address the court, but keep it relevant." Lena stepped forward, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. Every eye in the room was on her, judging, assessing, waiting. "My father was a drunk," she said, her voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. "I'm not going to pretend he was a good man or a responsible man, but he wasn't a thief. He never had $3,000 in his life. He barely had $3 most weeks." She looked directly at Reed. "You fired him because he drank on the job. Fine, that was fair. But then he died, and suddenly there were all these debts, papers I'd never seen before, signatures that didn't quite look right. And my uncle, who never cared about me when my father was alive, suddenly appeared with so much concern." Her voice hardened. "You wanted my land because it sits on a water source. Because whoever controls that spring controls irrigation for half the valley. My father told me once that you'd offered to buy it and he'd refused. Said it was the only thing he had to leave me, the only way to make sure I'd be taken care of when he was gone." She turned to the courtroom. "So you manufactured a debt. You forged documents. And when I couldn't pay, when no one in this town would help me because they're all afraid of Magnus Reed, you had me sold, stripped me of everything and put me on that platform like I was nothing, like I was property to be used and discarded." Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Rowan Hale bought me that day, and I thought my life was over. Thought I was just trading one prison for another. But he gave me something none of you ever did. He gave me respect, treated me like a human being, like someone with worth beyond what she could provide or produce." She looked at Rowan, saw the fierce pride in his eyes. "He taught me I was stronger than I knew, that I didn't have to accept injustice just because powerful men said it was law. And now I'm standing here, in front of all of you, and I'm saying no more. No more lies, no more corruption, no more letting Magnus Reed destroy lives because he has money and power, and you're all too afraid to stop him." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even Harrison seemed frozen, unable to speak. "I didn't steal anything," Lena continued. "But even if I had, even if every word Reed says is true, Ask yourselves this. Is it justice when a girl loses everything because her father made mistakes? Is it justice when powerful men can buy and sell human beings? Is it justice when the law protects money instead of people? She turned back to Harrison. I'm not asking for mercy, Your Honor. I'm asking for actual justice, real evidence, real proof, not just the word of a man who profits from my conviction. She sat down, her whole body trembling. Rowan's hand found her shoulder, squeezed once. The silence stretched until Harrison cleared his throat. Mr. Reed, I'm going to ask you directly. Do you have any concrete evidence, bank records, independent witnesses, anything beyond your own ledgers that proves Thomas Holloway stole $3,000? Reed's face had gone cold and hard. My word should be enough. That's not what I asked. I'm a pillar of this community. I've donated to the church, supported local businesses, provided jobs. Do you have evidence? Harrison repeated. Reed stood abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be interrogated like a criminal. I'm the victim here. Sit down, Mr. Reed, Harrison said quietly, or I'll hold you in contempt. For a long moment, Reed stood there, his power and authority radiating from him like heat. Then, slowly, he sat. I have my business records, he said through gritted teeth. That's all the evidence required by law. Harrison looked at the ledger Blackwood had presented, then at Rowan's evidence of the date discrepancy, then at the packed courtroom. This court will take a 30-minute recess, he announced. I need to review the evidence in my chambers. As people filed out, talking in hushed, excited voices, Lena remained seated. Rowan stayed beside her, solid and steady. That was brave, he said quietly. What you did, standing up like that. I learned from you, she said. No. He turned her to face him. That was all you. I just gave you space to be who you already were. Sutton approached, his expression unreadable. Judge wants to see you both. In chambers. Now. They followed him through a side door into a small office where Harrison sat behind a desk covered in papers. He looked tired, older than he had in the courtroom. Close the door, he said. Sutton did, then took a position by the exit, watching, waiting. Harrison looked at Lena, then at Rowan. I've been a judge in this territory for 15 years, and in that time I've made a lot of decisions I'm not proud of. Decisions influenced by money, by power, by fear of what men like Magnus Reed could do to me and my family. He picked up the forged ledger. But this is too far even for me. The date discrepancy alone is enough to throw the whole case into doubt, and Miss Holloway's testimony, her knowledge of that water source, he shook his head. I can't ignore it. So you'll dismiss the charges? Rowan asked. I should, Harrison said. But if I do, Reed will destroy me. He owns half this town, including the men who decide whether I keep this position. He looked at them directly. I'm giving you a choice. I can dismiss with prejudice, which means Lena goes free permanently, but Reed will appeal to the territorial government and probably win. Or I can declare a mistrial, send this to a higher court in Denver where Reed's influence is less absolute. How long would that take? Lena asked. Months, maybe a year, and you'd have to stay in custody during that time, or flee the territory entirely. Lena looked at Rowan. His jaw was tight, his eyes calculating. There's a third option, Rowan said slowly. What's that? You dismiss the charges, and we deal with Reed ourselves. Harrison's eyebrows rose.
This story was posted on the channel
justice.
West of Betrayal.
I'm not asking you to
Please do
condone
not
it.
repost
I'm asking you
it
to
in any
look the other
form.
way while actual justice happens. Rowan leaned forward. Reed's committed crimes, fraud, forgery, probably worse. Let us prove it. Give us time to find evidence that will stick, that can't be appealed or bought off. And if you can't find it, then we leave, Rowan said. Take Lena somewhere Reed's influence doesn't reach. Start over. Harrison considered this, his fingers drumming on the desk. Finally, he nodded. I'll dismiss the charges. Insufficient evidence. But Lena Holloway, you're officially banished from Bitter Creek and surrounding territories for 3 years. If you're found here after today, you'll be arrested on sight for trespassing. It was a compromise, a way to save face while setting them free. Lena understood that. I accept, she said. Good. Harrison stood. I'll announce the decision in 10 minutes. I suggest you both be ready to leave town quickly. Reed won't take this well. They returned to the courtroom where the crowd had reassembled. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew something significant was about to happen. Harrison took his seat, banged the gavel once. After reviewing the evidence presented, I find that the prosecution has failed to meet the burden of proof. The date discrepancy in the financial records, the lack of independent witnesses, and the questionable chain of events surrounding the alleged theft all cast reasonable doubt on the charges. Reed stood. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. I'm not finished." Harrison's voice was steel. "The charges against Lena Holloway are dismissed with prejudice. However, Miss Holloway is hereby banished from Bitter Creek and surrounding territories for a period of 3 years. If she returns during that time, she will be subject to immediate arrest." "You can't," Reed started. "I can, and I have. This court is adjourned." Harrison stood and walked out before Reed could protest further. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reed was shouting. Blackwood was gathering papers frantically. People were talking over each other in confused excitement. Rowan grabbed Lena's hand. "We need to go. Now." They pushed through the crowd toward the door. Sutton stepped in front of them, and Lena's heart sank, but he simply stepped aside. "You've got about 5 minutes before Reed organizes his men," he said quietly. "Make them count." Outside, horses waited. Lena realized Rowan must have arranged this beforehand, must have planned for every possibility. They mounted quickly, and he led her not toward Pine Ridge, but in a different direction entirely. Behind them, she heard Reed's voice rising in fury, heard the sound of men being called to action, but they were already moving, already putting distance between themselves and Bitter Creek. They rode hard for an hour before Rowan finally slowed. They were in rough country now, rocky and steep, the kind of terrain that discouraged pursuit. "Where are we going?" Lena asked. "Somewhere safe," Rowan said. "Somewhere we can plan our next move." "What next move?" The judge dismissed the charges. "The charges?" Rowan agreed. "But Reed's not going to stop. You humiliated him in there, made him look like the criminal he is. He'll come after you, legal or not. Then we run. Like you said, start over somewhere else." Rowan pulled his horse to a stop, turned to look at her. "Is that what you want, to run? To spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder?" Lena met his eyes, saw the question he was really asking. "No," she said firmly. "I want to fight. I want to expose what he did, make sure he can't do it to anyone else." A slow smile spread across Rowan's face. "Good, because I've got an idea. It's dangerous, probably illegal, and might get us both killed." "Tell me," Lena said. And there, in the wilderness between what was and what could be, Rowan told her about the ledger her father had kept, about how it probably contained evidence of Reed's fraud, false mining claims, stolen property, all of it documented by a man who'd worked in Reed's office and seen too much. "Your uncle took it," Rowan said, "which means it's probably still in your old house, the one he bought and sold to Reed. You want to break in? Steal it back?" "I want to recover evidence of crimes," Rowan corrected. "There's a difference." Lena thought about it, about the risk, the danger, the possibility of finally proving what Reed had done, about justice that was real instead of bought. "When do we go?" she asked. Rowan's smile widened. "Tonight, under cover of darkness, in and out before anyone knows we were there." It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of thing that could get them both killed or imprisoned. Lena found herself smiling back. "Then let's do it." They rode on toward whatever came next, and Lena realized something profound. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She wasn't just enduring what the world threw at her. She was choosing her own path, fighting her own battles, standing up instead of bowing down. And beside her rode a man who'd given her that gift, not freedom from struggle, but the strength to face it head on. Whatever happened next, whatever dangers waited in the darkness ahead, she would face them standing tall, just like he'd taught her, just like she'd always been capable of doing, if only someone had believed in her enough to show her how. They waited in the forest outside Bitter Creek as the sun set, watching the town settle into evening routines. Lamplight flickered in windows, smoke rose from chimneys. The world moved on as if nothing had changed, as if Lena's life hadn't been dismantled and reassembled in the space of a single day. Rowan had found them shelter in a small cave, invisible from the main trails. He'd built a tiny fire, shielded so its light wouldn't carry, and they ate dried meat and hard biscuits while planning their next move. "The house sits on the eastern edge of town," Lena said, drawing a rough map in the dirt with a stick. "There's a back door that leads to the kitchen. My father used to leave it unlocked when he'd been drinking, couldn't manage the front lock." "Is it still your house inside, or has Reed changed it?" "I don't know. I haven't been back since—" She paused, swallowed the emotion. "Since they took me." Rowan studied the map. "Guards?" "Shouldn't be. It's just a house now. Reed uses it for storage, I think. At least that's what I heard." "Storage?" Rowan's eyes sharpened. "Documents, maybe? Records he doesn't want in his main office?" "Maybe." Lena hadn't thought of that, but it made sense. Her father's small house, now owned by the man who'd destroyed her life, filled with evidence of his crimes. "We go in 2 hours," Rowan said. "Full dark, when the town's asleep. We find that ledger, find anything else useful, and we're out before sunrise." "And if we get caught?" "We don't." His voice was absolute. "But if something goes wrong, you run. Don't wait for me, don't look back, just run and keep running until you're safe." "I'm not leaving you." "Lena." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Listen to me. You stood up in that courtroom today. You showed everyone who you really are. Strong, brave, unbreakable. Don't throw that away by dying with me if this goes wrong." "You wouldn't leave me." "That's different." "How? Because you're a man and I'm a woman? Because you think your life matters less than mine?" She met his eyes steadily. "We're in this together, Rowan. Whatever happens, we face it together." He looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Finally, he nodded. "Together," he agreed. "But we're not dying tonight. We're getting that evidence, exposing Reed, and ending this." "Then what?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "What do you mean?" "After we expose Reed, after this is over, what happens then?" She couldn't quite look at him. "My 3 years aren't up. I still owe you 2 years and 8 months of work." Silence. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. "Is that what you want?" Rowan asked quietly. "To go back to the mountain and work off a debt?" "I want—" She stopped, struggled to find words for the tangle of emotions in her chest. "I don't know what I want. A month ago, all I wanted was to survive. Now I want more than that. I want a life that's mine. I want to matter to someone. I want—" She couldn't finish. The wanting was too big, too dangerous to speak aloud. "You matter to me," Rowan said, his voice rough. "More than you should. More than I planned. Somewhere between that auction platform and today, you stopped being someone I'd bought and became someone I—" He stopped, shook his head. "This isn't the time for this conversation. We need to focus." But Lena's heart was racing, her skin tingling with something that felt like hope and terror mixed together. "Became someone you what?" "Someone I care about," he said finally, meeting her eyes. "Someone I'd burn the world down to protect. Someone I can't imagine going back to that mountain without." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "When this is over," Lena said carefully, "when Reed's exposed and we're free, will you still want me there? On your mountain? Will you still want to be there?"
This story
Yes.
was posted on the channel
The answer
west
came
of
without
Betrayal.
hesitation.
Please do not
Not because I
repost
owe
it
you,
in any form.
not because I have nowhere else to go, but because that cabin feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been. Because working beside you feels right in a way nothing else ever has. She took a breath. Because when I imagine my future, you're in it. Rowan stood slowly, crossed to where she sat, and knelt so they were eye level. "Lena Holloway, you're the bravest person I've ever met. And when this is over, when we've finished what we started, I'm going to ask you properly. Not as someone who bought you, not as someone you owe, but as someone who wants to build a life with you. If you'll have me." Tears burned in her eyes, but she smiled through them. "Ask me now." "No." He touched her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. "When this is done, when you're truly free to choose without fear or obligation, that's when I'll ask, and that's when you'll answer." He stood, offered his hand. "But first, We've got a ledger to steal and a corrupt businessman to destroy. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. The moment passed, but its echo remained, a promise of something waiting on the other side of tonight's danger. They prepared in silence. Rowan checked his weapons, made sure everything was secured. Lena braided her hair tight, tucked it under a dark cap Rowan provided. They dressed in dark clothes, moved like shadows even in the firelight. "Remember," Rowan said as they prepared to leave, "quick and quiet. We get in, find what we need, get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks." "Understood." They rode slowly toward Bitter Creek, leaving their horses tethered in the forest a quarter-mile out. The walk into town was tense, every sound magnified in the darkness. A dog barked somewhere. A baby cried. Normal sounds of a town settling into sleep, but each one made Lena's heart jump. The house appeared through the darkness, small, shabby, heartbreakingly familiar. Lena had been born in that house. Her mother had died there. Her father had drunk himself to death within those walls. It held every memory she had, good and bad, and now it belonged to her enemy. Rowan touched her shoulder, brought her back to the present. They circled around back, moving through shadows. The back door was still there, still in the same spot. Lena reached for the handle with trembling fingers. It was locked. "I can pick it," Rowan whispered, pulling out a small metal tool. But Lena remembered something. The loose board under the back step, where her father used to hide a spare key when he was too drunk to manage locks. She knelt, felt along the underside of the step, and her fingers found metal. The key was still there. She held it up to Rowan, who nodded approvingly. The lock turned with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the quiet night. The door swung open. They slipped inside. The house smelled different, dusty, unused, like a place where no one lived anymore. Lena's eyes adjusted to the deeper darkness inside. The main room was filled with boxes, crates, filing cabinets. Rowan had been right. Reed was using it for storage. "Start looking," Rowan whispered. "Anything that looks like a personal ledger, anything with your father's handwriting." They searched systematically, carefully, replacing everything exactly as they found it. Minutes ticked by. Then an hour. Lena was beginning to lose hope when her fingers closed around a small book wedged behind a loose board in what used to be her father's bedroom. She pulled it out, and even in the darkness she recognized it. The worn leather cover. The way the spine was cracked from constant opening. Her father's ledger. "Rowan," she breathed. "I found it." He was beside her in seconds. She opened it carefully, and Rowan lit a small shielded candle so they could read. The pages were filled with her father's cramped handwriting. Dates, names, amounts, but not the kind of accounting a legitimate business would keep. These were records of fraud, false mining claims filed in the names of dead men, property seized through forged debt documents, bribes paid to officials. Years of corruption, all meticulously documented by a drunk clerk who'd seen too much. "This is it," Rowan said, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "This is enough to destroy him." "Why would my father keep this?" Lena wondered. "Why not just—" "Insurance," Rowan said. "Or guilt, or both." He knew what Reed was doing was wrong, but he was too weak or too scared to stop it, so he documented it. Maybe he planned to use it someday, or maybe he just needed to write it down to live with himself. A sound from the front of the house froze them both. Footsteps. Multiple people. "Someone's here," Lena whispered. "The back door. Now." They moved quickly but quietly toward the kitchen. Rowan extinguished the candle, plunging them back into darkness. The footsteps were getting closer, voices audible now. "Check everything," a voice said, Reed's voice, unmistakable. "That ledger has to be here somewhere. Crane swore he saw Holloway with it." "Why would he keep it?" another voice asked. "Because he was a fool, but a fool who could have destroyed me if he'd been sober enough to know what he had." They were between Lena and the back door now, trapped. Rowan's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezed once. She felt him shift, heard the subtle sound of his knife sliding from its sheath. "The bedroom," Reed said. "Start there." Lamplight spilled down the hallway. In seconds, they'd be discovered. Rowan pulled Lena into the small closet in her father's room, the space where she used to hide as a child when he came home drunk and angry. They pressed against the back wall, barely breathing, as footsteps entered the room. "Tear it apart if you have to," Reed said. "That ledger is worth more than this entire house." Sounds of destruction, furniture being overturned, boards being pried up. The closet door was thin, flimsy. If they looked here, it was over. Lena's hand found the small knife Mary had given her, still tucked in her boot. It wasn't much, but it was something. Beside her, Rowan was coiled like a spring, ready to explode into violence if necessary. "Found something!" A man's voice triumphant. "The ledger? No, but look at this." Whatever he'd found distracted them, drew them toward the front room. The sounds of searching moved away from the bedroom. "Now," Rowan breathed. They slipped out of the closet, moving on silent feet toward the kitchen. The back door was 20 feet away. 15. 10. "Someone's been here recently," a voice said suddenly. "This dust's been disturbed. Search the house. Every room. If they're still here, find them." Rowan and Lena burst through the back door and ran. Behind them, shouts erupted. Lamplight spilled from the house as men poured out in pursuit. "There, in the woods!" Gunfire cracked through the night. A bullet whined past Lena's head, so close she felt the displacement of air. Rowan pulled her sideways into deeper shadows, running in a zigzag pattern that made them harder targets. The forest swallowed them. Behind, the sounds of pursuit grew more organized. Reed was shouting orders, coordinating his men. These weren't random thugs. They moved like hunters, spreading out to cut off escape routes. "The horses!" Lena gasped. "Too far. They'll catch us before we reach them." Rowan pulled her deeper into the forest, away from where they'd left the mounts. "We lose them first, then circle back." They ran through darkness so complete Lena could barely see Rowan in front of her. Branches tore at her face and clothes. Roots tried to trip her. But fear gave her speed, and Rowan's hand in hers gave her direction. Behind them, the pursuit spread out. Voices called to each other, coordinating. They were being herded, she realized, pushed toward something. "Rowan, I know, it's a trap." Ahead, she heard water. The river that ran through the valley, swollen with spring melt, running fast and dangerous. Reed's men were pushing them toward it, cutting off other escape routes. They broke from the trees onto the riverbank. The water roared past, white and violent in the moonlight. "We have to cross," Rowan said. "We'll drown." "We'll die if we stay." He was already pulling off his coat, his boots. "The water's fast, but not deep here. We can wade across if we're careful." Behind them, lamplight flickered through the trees, voices getting closer. Lena pulled off her own boots, tied them together, and slung them around her neck. The ledger went inside her shirt, pressed against her skin. "Together," she said. "Together," Rowan agreed. They stepped into the water. The cold was shocking, instantly numbing. The current grabbed at them, tried to sweep their feet out from under them. Rowan went first, testing each step, his hand locked around Lena's wrist. Halfway across, Lena's foot slipped on a smooth rock. She went down, the water closing over her head. The current seized her, pulled her downstream. Her lungs burned. The world was dark and cold and violent. Strong hands grabbed her, hauled her up. Rowan, his face set in grim determination, pulled her against the current. They struggled forward, inch by inch, until finally, her feet found purchase on the far bank. They collapsed on the shore, gasping and shaking. Behind them, Reed's men had reached the near bank. Lamplight played across the water. "There, on the other side!" Gunfire erupted again. Bullets kicked
This story
up dirt
was
near where
posted
they
on
lay.
the channel west
Rowan
of
pulled Lena
Betrayal.
up, and
Please
they
do
ran
not
again, leaving a
repost it
trail of
in any
water but
form.
putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. The men didn't follow across the river, too dangerous in the dark. But Lena knew this wasn't over. Reed would find another way, another crossing. This was just a delay. They ran until the sounds of pursuit faded, then kept running. When they finally stopped, both were trembling with cold and exhaustion. "The ledger," Rowan said. "Do you still have it?" Lena pulled it from her shirt. The leather was wet, but the pages inside were protected by the oilskin wrapping her father had used. She opened it carefully. The writing was smudged but readable. "We did it," she said, hardly believing it. "We actually did it." "Half of it," Rowan corrected. "We have the evidence. Now we need to use it." They found shelter in a rocky overhang and built a tiny fire to dry their clothes. As warmth slowly returned to Lena's body, Rowan studied the ledger page by page. "This is damning," he said. "More than I hoped. Reed's been defrauding people for years. Judges, marshals, territorial officials, all on his payroll. It's all here." "So what do we do with it?" "We take it to Denver, to the territorial governor. Reed's influence doesn't reach that far, and the governor's been looking for an excuse to crack down on corruption in the mining territories." Rowan looked up, his eyes fierce in the firelight. "We expose everything, make it public, force an investigation Reed can't buy his way out of. That's days of travel. 3 days if we ride hard, and Reed will be looking for us every mile of the way." He closed the ledger carefully. "But I know routes he doesn't. Trails through the high country that most people avoid. We can do this, Lena." She believed him. In that moment, soaking wet and hunted, she believed they could do anything. They rested for a few hours until the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. Then they moved out, circling wide to where they'd left the horses. The animals were still there, nervous but unharmed. They rode east toward Denver, toward justice. The journey was hard, sleeping in caves and under trees, eating cold rations, always watching their back trail for signs of pursuit. Twice they saw Reed's men in the distance, searching. Once they had to hide for hours while a group passed within 100 yards of their position. But Rowan knew the land like he'd been born to it. He found paths through terrain so rough that horses could barely manage it, places where following would mean certain death for anyone who didn't know the way. On the third day, Denver came into view. A real city, bigger than anything Lena had ever seen. Buildings of brick and stone, streets filled with people, the noise and chaos of civilization. Rowan led them straight to the territorial governor's office, an imposing building in the center of town. Inside, he demanded to see Governor Walsh, showed the ledger to the secretary, and refused to leave until they were heard. An hour later, they sat in a well-appointed office across from Governor Walsh himself, a stern man in his 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This is quite an accusation," Walsh said, studying the ledger. "Magnus Reed is a powerful man, influential. If these claims are false—" "They're not false," Lena said. "I lived through his corruption. He forged debts to steal my property, had me sold to cover those debts, and when I escaped, he brought false charges to drag me back. Everything in that ledger is true." Walsh looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. "You're the woman from the trial. I received a telegram about the case yesterday. Judge Harrison said you were the bravest defendant he'd ever seen." "Harrison sent a telegram?" Rowan asked. "He did. Said he'd been forced to compromise his principles too many times because of Reed's influence. But watching you fight back reminded him why he became a judge." Walsh smiled slightly. "He sent copies of all the trial documents. Combined with this ledger, I have more than enough to act." He stood, moved to the window overlooking the city. "I've known Reed was corrupt for years, but knowing and proving are different things. He's careful, covers his tracks, buys loyalty. This ledger—" He turned back. "This is the proof I've needed." "What happens now?" Lena asked. "Now I send federal marshals to Bitter Creek, real ones, not the bought and paid for variety. They'll arrest Reed, seize his assets, and begin a full investigation." Walsh's expression hardened. "And I'll make sure every newspaper in the territory knows about it. Reed's power comes from people being afraid of him. Once that fear breaks, his empire crumbles." Relief flooded through Lena so powerfully she felt dizzy. It was over. Finally, impossibly, it was over. "What about Lena?" Rowan asked. "She was banished from Bitter Creek. That still stands?" "Not anymore. I'm issuing a full pardon and a formal apology from the territorial government." Walsh looked at Lena. "What was done to you was criminal. You deserve justice, not banishment." "I don't want to go back to Bitter Creek," Lena said quietly. "There's nothing for me there anymore." "Then where will you go?" Walsh asked. She looked at Rowan, saw the question in his eyes, the same question he'd promised to ask when this was over. "I have a place," Rowan said, "on a mountain. It's rough country, but it's honest, and there's room for two if she wants it." "I want it," Lena said softly, "not because I owe you, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I choose it. I choose you." Rowan's expression transformed, relief and joy, and something deeper mixing together. Then we go home. Walsh arranged for them to stay in Denver while the marshals dealt with Reed. 3 weeks later, word came back. Reed had been arrested, his assets seized. Victor Crane had tried to flee but was caught at the territorial border. Others implicated in the ledger were being rounded up one by one. The corruption that had ruled Bitter Creek for years was finally being exposed. Judge Harrison sent a personal letter to Lena, apologizing for his compromises and thanking her for reminding him what justice meant. The property that had been stolen from her was returned, along with compensation for her suffering. "What will you do with it?" Rowan asked as she read the letter. "Sell it," she said without hesitation. "Use the money to help other people Reed victimized. There are probably dozens of families who lost everything to his schemes." "That's generous." "It's right." She folded the letter carefully. "I don't need that land anymore. I have everything I need waiting for me on a mountain." They left Denver on a spring morning, the world warming and green with new growth. The ride back to Rowan's Mountain took 5 days, but it felt like coming home. With every mile, Lena felt the tension of the last months falling away, replaced by something she'd never experienced before: peace. When the cabin finally came into view, she felt her throat tighten with emotion. It looked exactly as she'd left it, solid and welcoming against the mountain's face. "It's still here," she said, half laughing. "Did you think it wouldn't be?" "I don't know. After everything that happened, part of me thought I'd imagined it, that it was too good to be real." Rowan dismounted, helped her down. They stood together looking at the cabin, at the mountain, at the life waiting for them. "Lena Holloway," he said, turning to face her, "I promised I'd ask you properly when this was done, when you were free to choose without fear or obligation." He took both her hands in his. "I'm asking now, not as someone who bought you, not as someone you owe, but as someone who loves you more than he thought possible, who wants to build a life with you, share this mountain with you, grow old beside you." His voice was rough with emotion. "Will you stay? Not for 3 years, but for always?" Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this is where I want to be, with you, for always." He kissed her then, gentle and fierce all at once, and Lena felt the last piece of her past fall away. She wasn't the girl who'd been sold on an auction platform anymore, wasn't the frightened woman led into the mountains by a stranger. She was Lena Holloway, who'd stood up to corruption and won, who'd found her strength in the wilderness, who'd chosen her own future instead of accepting what others decided for her. That evening, they stood on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. The world was painted in gold and crimson, impossibly beautiful. "Do you remember what you said that first night?" Lena asked, "about taking off everything?" "I remember." Rowan's arm was around her shoulders, solid and warm. "I understand now what you meant. Not the clothes, the fear, the shame, the belief that I was worth less than other people." She leaned into him. "You helped me shed all of that, helped me become who I was always supposed to be." "You did that yourself," Rowan said. "I just gave you space to do it." "We gave each other space," Lena corrected. "You needed me as much as I needed you, needed someone to remind you that caring about people isn't weakness, that building a life with someone is worth the risk of losing them." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have something worth protecting, someone worth
This
fighting
story
for."
was posted on the
And
channel
now-
west of
now
the
I
trail.
remember.
Please do not
He turned her to
repost
face
it
him.
in any form.
"You taught me that second chances exist, that it's possible to start over, build something new from the ruins of what was." The sun dipped below the peaks, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the valley below, life went on, people struggling and surviving, fighting their own battles against injustice and fear. But here, on this mountain, two people who'd been broken by the world had found each other and built something whole. Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the auction platform, the fear, the gradual transformation from property to person. She thought about standing in that courtroom and refusing to bow, about running through the night with evidence that would topple a corrupt empire, about choosing this life, this man, this future. Every moment had been necessary, Every struggle had shaped her. The girl who'd stood in chains wouldn't have been strong enough for this life. But the woman she'd become, tested by hardship, forged in fire, unbreakable, she was exactly who she needed to be. "What are you thinking?" Rowan asked. "That I'm grateful," she said simply, "for all of it, even the hard parts, because they brought me here." "No regrets?" "Not one." She smiled up at him. "Well, maybe one small regret." "What's that?" "That I didn't punch Magnus Reed in his smug face when I had the chance." Rowan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "There's still time. I'm sure he'll try something when he gets out of prison. In 20 years or so? Give or take?" He pulled her closer. "Think you can wait that long?" "For the satisfaction of punching Reed? Absolutely." She kissed him softly. "But I'm not waiting for anything else. I'm done waiting, done being patient, done letting the world tell me what I can and can't have." "What do you want?" he asked. "This, you. A life where I wake up every morning and choose to be here instead of being trapped here. Where I work because I love the work, not because I owe a debt." She looked out at the darkening mountains. "I want to plant a garden come spring. Learn to shoot your rifle properly. Maybe get some goats. I always liked the goats." "Goats it is," Rowan agreed. "Anything else?" "A future," she said. "A real one, built on choice instead of obligation, built on love instead of transaction." "You have it," he promised. "All of it, for as long as you want it." "Forever then," Lena said. "I want it forever." They stood together as night fell completely, the mountain settling into its ancient rhythms around them. Inside the cabin, the fire waited to be lit, dinner waited to be cooked, a life waited to be lived. But for now, they stayed outside, watching the stars appear one by one, the same stars that had looked down on Lena when she stood in chains. The same stars that had witnessed her transformation from victim to survivor to something more, a woman who'd reclaimed her own story, written her own ending. She'd been told to strip away everything, her dignity, her past, her hope. And in a way, she had. She'd shed the fear that had kept her small, the shame that had kept her silent, the belief that she deserved less than full humanity. What remained was strength, truth, love, and the unshakable knowledge that she'd never bow to injustice again, that she'd fight for what mattered, stand for what was right, and choose her own path no matter how hard the journey. The mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of spring. Somewhere in the valley, new grass was pushing through old snow, life renewing itself, as it always did. Lena breathed deeply, taking it all in, this moment, this man, this hard-won peace. "Ready to go inside?" Rowan asked. "In a minute," she said. "I just want to stand here a little longer, want to remember this feeling." "What feeling?" She thought about it, searched for the right words. "Freedom," she said finally. "Real freedom. Not just the absence of chains, but the presence of choice, the knowledge that my life is mine, that my future is something I get to build instead of something that's done to me." Rowan's arm tightened around her. "You've always had that freedom, Lena. You just didn't know it yet." "Maybe," she agreed. "Or maybe I needed you to show me how to claim it." They finally went inside as the temperature dropped. Rowan built up the fire while Lena started dinner, falling into the familiar routine they'd developed months ago. But it felt different now. Not like duty or obligation, but like partnership. Like building a life together instead of simply surviving side by side. After dinner, Lena pulled out the book they'd been reading before everything had fallen apart. She opened to where they'd left off, began to read aloud. Rowan listened with his eyes closed, the same peaceful expression he always wore during these moments. When she finished the chapter, she closed the book and looked at him. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't gone to that auction?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "but then I remind myself that dwelling on what-ifs is pointless. What matters is what did happen. I went. I saw you. I couldn't walk away." "Why?" She'd asked before, but wanted to hear it again, needed to understand what he'd seen in her that day. "Because you were standing there with your head up, refusing to break. Because everyone else was treating you like you were nothing, and I knew, absolutely knew, that you were something." He opened his eyes, looked at her. "And because some part of me recognized you. Recognized that you'd survived things that should have destroyed you, just like I had. Knew that you deserved better than what that town was going to give you. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for letting me, he replied, for trusting me even when you had no reason to, for becoming part of my life in a way I didn't know I needed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling, the wind singing outside. Finally, Lena stood and moved to the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. I used to think strength meant enduring without complaint, she said, meant being quiet and small and not causing trouble. My whole life, that's what I was told being strong meant. And now? Rowan came to stand beside her. Now I know that real strength is standing up even when it's terrifying, speaking truth even when it's dangerous, choosing your own path even when everyone says you can't. She turned to him. You taught me that. Showed me that strength isn't about how much you can endure, but about refusing to endure what's wrong. You taught me something too, Rowan said. Taught me that building walls to keep pain out also keeps life out. That caring about someone again, risking loss again, is worth it if you find the right person. And did you? Lena asked softly. Find the right person? Yeah, he said, pulling her close. I did. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the mountain solid and eternal around them. The journey that had brought them here had been hard, painful, dangerous, filled with moments when everything could have gone wrong. But it had also been necessary. Every struggle had taught them something. Every hardship had revealed strength they didn't know they possessed. Every moment of fear had made the moments of peace more precious. Lena thought about the girl she'd been, afraid, ashamed, believing she deserved the cruelty the world showed her. That girl was gone, transformed by fire into someone stronger, braver, unbreakable. And the man who'd bought her freedom had found his own freedom in the process, had learned to live again instead of just survive, had discovered that his mountain could be a home instead of a hiding place. They'd saved each other, she realized, not in the dramatic way stories usually told, but in the quiet, persistent way that real salvation happened, by being present, by believing in each other, by refusing to give up even when giving up would have been easier. The command that had once sounded cruel, take off everything, had revealed its true meaning. It wasn't about shame or control. It was about shedding the weight of the past, breaking free from fear, and stepping into a life finally, completely, her own. Outside, the mountain settled into sleep. Inside, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds prepared for bed, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more work, more moments to choose each other again. But they'd face it together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd looked at the world's worst and decided to build something beautiful anyway. Lena blew out the lamp and climbed into bed. Not the small cot in the corner, but the larger bed she now shared with Rowan. He pulled her close, and she listened to his heartbeat, steady and sure. Sleep well, he murmured. I will, she promised. And she did, dreamlessly and deeply, secure in the knowledge that she'd never have to face the world alone again, that she'd found not just shelter on this mountain, but home, not just survival, but life, not just freedom from chains, but the freedom to choose, to love, to become who she was always meant to be. The girl sold in chains had become a woman who chose her own future, and that future, hard-won and precious, stretched ahead like an open road, full of possibility, challenge, and the absolute certainty that whatever came, she would face it standing tall.
This story was posted on the channel west of
just
Betrayal.
as she'd learned,
Please
just
do not
as she'd
repost
fought
it
for,
in any form.
just as she deserved.